Okay, well, welcome everybody, committee members, West Coast Regional Council and Buller District Council staff, members of the public and those joining us online today to the Westport Rating District Joint Committee meeting on the 2nd of April 2025. My name's Peter Haddock and I'm the Chair of the West Coast Regional Council and be Chair of this committee until October elections, at which time the Chair will revert to the Mayor of the Buller District Council for the following a year up till October, in which time it will revert back to the Regional Council. I'll now request each committee member introduce themselves and the staff members so those online can see who we all are. So I'll start with you, Mark.
Good afternoon, my name is Mark McIntyre, West Coast Regional Council, Buller representative.
Kia ora, Simon Pickford, Buller CEO. Good afternoon, Darryl Liu, Chief Executive, West Coast Regional.
Good afternoon, Peter Blackwood, Chief Engineer, West Coast Regional Council.
John Paul, I'm the engineer responsible for the development of the new rating system.
Afternoon, everybody. My name's Tom Hopkins. I'm the Capital Program Manager for the West Coast Regional Council.
Good afternoon. I'm Chantal Mills. I am the West Coast Regional Council Project Accountant and am I'm helping to look after the funds for the Westport Flood Protection Scheme.
Good afternoon. I'm Joan Howard. I'm Buller District Council Councillor, Westport Ward.
Kia ora, Mayor Jamie Klein, Buller District. Brett Cummings, Deputy Chair of the West Coast Regional Council.
Chris Cole, I'm a newly appointed councillor for District Regional Council.
Yep, and online we've got, do you want to introduce yourselves online?
Yep, Jodie Murray, Community Representative.
Kia ora, Mark Penner, NZTA System Manager. I'm here instead of James Cagle, so looking after maintenance and operations across the State Highway Network.
Peter Miller.
Peter Miller, I'm the Corporate Services Manager for West Coast Regional Council.
Kelly.
Hey there, Kelly, Senior Assets Lead at the Regional Council.
Fiona.
I'm Fiona Ferrer, I'm Management Accountant at West Coast Regional Council.
Thank you. I think we've got everyone. Are there any apologies today? No received. Okay. Before I ask, I'd like to acknowledge the excellent work done by the Independent Chair and Westport Area Community Representative Hugh McMillan. Thanks you for chairing this committee and the efforts you have put into the committee for the benefit of your community over the years. I'd further like to acknowledge the efforts and commitment to this community by former West Coast Regional Councillor Frank Dooley prior to his sudden and unexpected passing late last year. Frank's great wish was to see his beloved town of Westport protected from future flooding events. I'd like to advise also the position for the second Westport Area Community Representative was undecided by the Buller District Council, and the vacant position will be re-advertised by the West Coast Regional Council in the coming weeks. So next item, I just want to also let people know that the pages on their agendas are on the top right-hand side of each of the papers. So if you're looking for your papers here. The next item on the list is declarations of interest. If anyone's got any declarations they wish to bring up now. No? Okay, we'll move on to public forum. So today we've got two people speaking in the public forum. We've got Kevin Smith and Paul Reynolds. Have we got any others? Yep, I'm sorry. Margaret Montgomery. Yep, so you'll be third. And we've got a fourth. No, just three. Okay, so the first speaker is Kevin Smith, and I'd just like speakers to be given 5 minutes to present, and at the end of their individual presentations, committee members will have the opportunity to ask questions or seek clarification from the presenter. This is not an opportunity for committee members to express their own views on matters. So Kevin, welcome along, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair, and everyone. My name's Kevin Smith. I'm here today to talk about the vacancy that was advertised. I've got 5 slides that I'll be going through. Perhaps first of all, I should say I'm surprised to see Colin Reedy is not mentioned here. I spoke to him on the phone half an hour ago. He said he would be here online.
Are you there, Colin? No.
I'll ring after this. Okay. But he did intend to be online. So there's a series of 5 slides. We've got the first one up. As we can see, this was from June last year, June 2024. The job was advertised. It called for nominations. I applied and I checked. I had a confirmation before the closing time. That was followed by many months of silence. Slide 2, please, Christine. So I said months of silence. I then started hearing rumours going around the town that approaches were being made to other people. On the basis of that, I submitted a Lagoima request, which is slide 2. We'll see it in due course. Some of the members here would have seen an email from me with the slides on as well. I haven't received a reply to the Lagoima request yet, but it said expect one before the 11th of April. Slide 3 is the reply I got from the Mayor, BDC. It said there was only the one application. In fact, I'm wrong. Slide 3 is from CEO of the West Coast Regional Council. It talks about the procedure if there's only one applicant, and which of course there was. So that will be included in the minutes of the meeting you'll see this afternoon. There was no path mentioned there about approaching the BDC. That path applied when there were more than 2, when there were 2 or more applicants. Here we are, we've got it now. So we can see it there on the screen. If there is more than one nomination, the selection process must then be run. Well, there wasn't more than 2. There was more than 1, I should say. There was 1. I went to the BDC. The next slide, please, which is the reply from Jamie. And it talks about the vote they had. 1 councillor had left the meeting. It was a marathon meeting. 1 councillor had left by then. So the vote was 5-5. Well, look around this room here and I look at the experience. Yeah, I'll remember the floods of 1970. I don't think too many others here would have remembered the 1970 floods and what went on. I've been involved with Westport in the flood situation for many, many years, over 50 years. That 1970 flood, it impacted our family. My father was up the river, up at Organs Island in a jet boat. Very, very dangerous. If anything happened, if the engine had stopped, anything happened, they were gone. He was doing a rescue, rescued Roy Powell off the back of a horse. So there were 3 of them, Roy Powell, Keith Powell, Royce Smith, could have all easily drowned in the 1970 flood. We were very, very lucky, but they survived. He still talks about it. In fact, it's really impacted him. He's got a very, very real feeling for the flood situation in Westport to this day. He's been up the river in a jet boat as recently as last year. He's seen what the river's doing, what's going on. As a result, talked to my father. We spoke before the last floods. We saw the flood coming. We were speaking for a month beforehand. The social media in this town was alive, talking about what's going to happen when the flood comes. On June the 30th, about 2 or 3 weeks before the flood, my father said, "When do you think the flood is coming?" I said, "I think next week." His reply, "I don't think it's that early." We were both thereabouts. It was 2.5 weeks later. I've almost finished. So anyway, I know what the community is saying. I spoke to hundreds of people last week. I was out on the street doing a survey. 80%, 90% of the ratepayers possibly, they've just lost faith in the councils. Slide 5. Slide 5 is the composition of this meeting here today. They're the ones I sent the email to. There's a Buller rep there at the bottom, TPA against it. We believe my name should be there. I put the application in, I nominated. I never got a reply one way or the other. I have not heard from the West Coast Regional Council. The Buller people will demand representation. Is this council doing justice to the Buller ratepayer when they are denied true democratic process? I request the chair's permission for me to take the seat at this table. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin, for your presentation. I haven't got the right to let you sit at this table because that was a decision to be made by the West Coast Regional Council, because the West Coast Regional Council didn't have a clear direction. Like I said earlier on, the West Coast Regional Council advertised that position, and I hope you will reapply. It will be a short process of 2 weeks, so you'll be...
There's no more meetings between now and the election.
Yes, there will be another meeting before that. It's quite important that we get a lot of work done. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think there'll be more meetings between now and the election.
So are you people going to go to the Westport community, the Buller community, and tell them this is democracy? This is how they get represented in this town? None of you people have been here for more than 50 years. None.
Oh, well, that's all right. I'll
take that on board. None of you have been here that long. You've got no idea what you're talking about. We can see the mistakes you guys are making. The whole town is talking about it.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Submission. Have any of the committee members here got any questions of Kevin or clarifications? If not, thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
Look forward to your
Cheers, everyone.
application. The next speaker we've got is Paul Reynolds. Paul, welcome to the table.
Thank you.
Chantal. I'm here because I was called out with Snodgrass residents to a meeting in the MBS Theatre where I learnt that the walls to save the community go through my property. They destroy a building section. They destroy my assets on the land. The community were quite pleased to receive that report, but no one from council had ever spoken to me about it. Nobody. I was going to preview of the proposed plan mere hours before. It was received positively by the invited Snodgrass community in the MBS Theatre, but to anyone that can read a plan, it's not just impractical, but quite impossible. And I'd like to know what part the Joint Committee played in that plan, because as far as I know, they haven't had a meeting since it was proposed. I gave permission to have surveys on site on my property to record the height of floor level on my property, but when I received a further request later for someone to come and take photos, I said, well, no, not until someone from council contacts me and lets me know specifically what you're doing. No contact was made, and I'd like to know why not. There's so many groups involved in this flood scheme that perhaps my request went to the wrong one or got lost in the chain of command. Or maybe even the organisation itself doesn't know who's responsible for ratepayer contact. So I'd like you to provide me with a flowchart showing the chain of command for all groups, committees, advisors, Westport TAG, and any other body associated with planning for flood protection, and a membership list for each, because it's not clear. And I know it's not clear in the community because I communicate with a lot of people. But in particular, what is the chain of command for representation for Snodgrass people? We've got a joint committee, we've got regional council, who is my first call to talk to a representative. What is the joint committee for? Since the last joint committee meeting, the plan for Snodgrass has been prepared, presented to the community without any apparent involvement from the joint committee. Why not? I'd also like to know what the actual purpose is for each of the other aforementioned groups. BDC received a warning from River Engineer Matt Gardner in 2015 regarding a developing flood risk that needed gravel removal near Organs Island. Are the Joint Committee aware of that? If they're aware of it, do they know what action was taken? You have a resolution to consider today regarding that the funding shortfall of 1.2 million or overspend on the Organs Island after government money was put in, as that damage could have been avoided if the warning had been taken note of, the Buller District Council received from consulting engineer Matt Gardner, does council have any insurance that would cover that loss? During the 2021 flood, there was insufficient waterway under the altered railway embankment parallel to Stevens Road. That caused floodwater to head up until there was sufficient pressure to blow the embankment, sending a wave of water downstream to meet Snodgrass and the rest of the town through Carwateri Place and through the racecourse into Westport. Is it planned to restore the waterway under the railway embankment? Because I know it's still the same as it was when the flood occurred. So with the same amount of water again, I can understand that it will burst again, because Kiwi Rail has replaced bridges with causeway. What are the criteria for the adaptation fund? I don't know. I hear the figure, the fund mentioned. And does the joint committee acknowledge that Snodgrass properties outside the walls will be adversely affected by the walls to protect others? Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions from the committee for Paul?
Sorry? Yep.
So Paul, I'll ensure that you get the answers back to the questions you've answered today. But questions I've got, were you aware of the Snodgrass Community Group?
I am, yes.
Yep, okay, that was the first thing, because you sort of said that you weren't being informed of what was happening with Snodgrass. And I believe there was a community group there, and that was the first question. And I believed also that the staff, and this is a question to you, spoke to you prior to the NSB meeting. Was that the case? Like, I thought they'd talk to you individually.
Maybe one point at a time. The first one regarding the Snodgrass Community Group, that was a community group organised to handle the TTPP matter. Right. It wasn't the Snodgrass group for all events that regional council wants to communicate with ratepayers. It was specifically to get legal advice regarding the TTPP. We all put money in, we got a legal opinion. We were successful in changing the designation you had for us. And as far as I know, that's the end of the community group. Sorry, remind me on the second part.
The second part was just, that we spoke, staff spoke to you prior to the NSB meeting, and I believe they did speak to, the affected residents prior to that that meeting, which was actually confined to the Snodgrass residents. It wasn't an open community meeting. It was a closed meeting for the Snodgrass residents. But I believe that they spoke to you before that.
That conversation took place. I referred to it in my notes. I said here that it was brought to my attention mere hours before that public meeting. I was shown the plan. The actual implications of the plan were not brought to my attention. I was just shown the plan. So some people can't read a plan. I was asked what I thought of it. I said it was disgusting, and it is. And it was disgusting that it was only brought to my attention hours before the public meeting, when the public were going to be informed that you had a solution for them. But that solution meant that you used my property, but you hadn't even approached me first. It should not happen that way.
I've got a question for there. Paul, I think it was kept quiet and only talked to you hours before, so it didn't get leaked to the media, so that we could talk to you one-on-one. So it wasn't leaked to the media and you heard through the media. That's why. I was there.
I don't change my opinion.
Okay. No, well, is there any further questions or clarifications from Paul on his submission? No. Daryl, you got a question or clarification?
I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman, but I do have some comments. Firstly, I want to comment that while it's been in the history of this joint committee that the frequency of the meetings has really only been on one sort of annual meeting, given the momentum and progress and decisions that need to be made on the flood scheme, we are going to need to meet much more often as an active joint committee going forward. And there will be at least one more meeting before the October election that will find its way into the diaries. I think we're going to need at least 3 or 4 meetings a year of this joint committee going forward. The second thing is to Mr. Reynolds' comment about the confusion around the governance structures around this Westport Flood Protection Project. I agree. it took me a while to get my head around it, because you've got West Coast Regional Council, you've got Buller District Council, you've got the steering group, which was initiated by the government to have government involvement in oversight of the scheme, given the government money, and then you've got this joint committee. What I'll undertake to do for the next meeting is write a paper in conjunction with Buller District Council, just to outline how it all works and what the jurisdictional areas are. I think that's really important to actually start to document now. Yeah, so I think I'll undertake to do that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks. So thanks, Paul, and we will come back to you with any of that, with those answers to those questions that have been answered today, unless anyone's got any further questions or clarifications. Thank you very much for your time today. Yep. Next speaker, Margaret Montgomery. Welcome, Margaret.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm Margaret Montgomery. I own the Holiday Park in Demet Street. It's about 5.5 hectares, and it's probably one of the largest residential areas here in the town. So look, the reason why I've popped down today is just a couple of questions more, or maybe for clarification. And it's to do with the words maintenance and the word temporary that keeps getting used. So my questions or clarification is this: will there be ongoing maintenance to projects once they are finished? So I know we're only at the start of things at the moment, but is when they're finished. So for example, Cat's Creek. It was cleaned out about 2.5 odd years ago, or sometime in that period. And now with the regrowth, it almost needs in some areas to be cleaned again. Is there going to be ongoing maintenance? Or are we going to be back in the same situation we were, where once we have regrowth, you've got water building up, potentially if that happens again, we need the ongoing maintenance. And will it be done? And who's going to do it? And when? The other one's Organs Island. This was one of the first emergency projects which was completed, yet some of it has not been finished. The trees that were on there originally back in the 1950s and stopped some of the flow and are planned to be done have not been done. So that project's not finished. So my other question is, when will it be finished, to say that item has been ticked off properly? Because the government money has been put there for it, so it should be done. My last real question stems from the repeated comments being made over the last 2+ years that the walls and bunding are being built from the government and the council money around the Westport area and things is going to be temporary. The temporary word has come in there a number of times in the media, in reports. My question is why? When you build a house, a shed, a hall, this building's 84 years, but you always get a resource consent and it says 50+. And yet the wording in the walls or in the work that's going to be completed, it does say temporary. Why? And if it's not supposed to be there because the engineers can't make their minds up or whatever the reason is, that needs to be fixed. So it comes back down to communication. That's all.
Thanks, Margaret. Very, very good questions here today. I don't know if we want to answer those questions, some of Margaret's questions there now. Do we want to answer those, or Daryl?
I'd actually like to make some comments, because I think Margaret's questions are very, very good ones. Look, I'll just start with the difficult one first. I'm not sure what this temporary one is, so maybe we could talk about that afterwards, Margaret. You can point me to where it says temporary, because that doesn't sound right to me. So thank you for drawing that to our attention. But what I'd like to say around a joint committee or a rating scheme committee, either or, doesn't matter. It's really important, and this is where this committee is going to start to actually fulfill its function. The joint committee and the rating scheme committees are a chance for ratepayers who pay into the scheme to come and voice issues, concerns around the scheme. And I want to stress that that's in two parts. That's around once the assets are built, around maintenance and ongoing oversight of built assets. But it's not just built assets, the flood banks, etc., that we're going to build. Any flood scheme, any river has other maintenance that needs to be done. There needs to be vegetation control or planting. There needs to be creek clean-outs and culvert clean-outs and all those sorts of things, especially if they pertain to the scheme. And so this joint committee is a real opportunity right now in those other areas, even before we build all the assets, for the committee to come along and talk about sediment build-up in the river that might need some dredge or vegetation control or planting or clean out of culverts and creeks and those sorts of things, and bring those to the attention of the community representatives or the local councillors. And speaking to the local councillors, I think there is some things that are emerging, and the staff are really keen to hear those. We'll put them on our inspection process and go and have a look at them and be able to report back. So very keen to hear about those things, Margaret. Thank you.
So Margaret, the other questions in your submission there, we will get answers back to, but I hope that covered some of the things, and I guarantee it's definitely not temporary. But are there any other questions or clarifications from Margaret's submission? These members? No, thanks very much for your input today. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, which is on pages 3 to 19 of your papers, and that's confirmation of the minutes of the 22nd of May 2024. And I had one small correction. It was just a minor spelling mistake I picked up, which was on page 12 of the papers, and it just said Councillor Howard sought clarification. It was community planning projects, but it was community planting projects. But that's the only correction. Are there any further corrections of the minor spelling mistakes? If not, would someone like to move that those are?
I've got one, Peter, for you.
Chantel?
On page 1, it says Wednesday, the 22nd of May with no date. It should be 2024.
Correct. Yep. No further corrections? Well, the recommendation is the Westport Rating District Joint Committee resolved to 1, receive the report, and 2, approve the amendments to no, I'm on the wrong page, sorry.
Peter,
No,
can I
we just
interrupt
moved
you
it.
again? There's one more as well.
Okay.
On page 15, Councillor Cummings asked how far away in that sentence, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences, 4 paragraphs from the bottom. It says flood resistance. I think it's supposed to say flood resilience.
Resilience. Thank you. Okay, would someone like to move that those are a true and correct minute with those amendments?
Yep.
Mayor Klein, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. All in favour say aye. Against? It's carried. Matters arising from those minutes that aren't covered in the action list. Now, I've circulated the action list in a bigger format here today, so are there any matters arising not covered in that action list? No? All right, we'll move on to the action list, which is making 5.1, which everyone's got a copy of. So the first item on the action list was declaration of interest, which was done. That's complete. Item 2 was agreed to take 2 matters to steering group. That had been complete. Reporting the financial reports in the future. This will include more narrative around line items. That's complete. Financial reporting, to contact Darren Prendergast offline to offer suggestions for improvements in the way the financial report was put together. That was Councillor Dooley. That's complete. And the last item is on there being recommended prudent reserve to 2023-24 Joint Committee. And that's in progress. And Tom, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, well, thanks.
You've got to press your button on the speaker there.
Can you hear me okay now?
Clear as a bell.
Okay. The short answer is that the prudent reserve for this rating district hasn't yet been set. It's normally developed as part of developing the asset management plan for each rating district's assets, and we're yet to commence developing that asset management plan. However, in the asset management plans for the other rating districts, the reference to prudent reserve reads as follows. It has been deemed within reason that all rating districts have a prudent reserve target balance that contributes to at least 100% of the damage exposure for a 10% AEP event, 70% for a 5% AEP event, and 50% for a 2% AEP event. These percentages define what is an appropriate and acceptable level of risk for council and the community. Now, I'm apologies, but I can't comment on where that methodology for setting the prudent reserve has come from. I'm just presenting this to you as an example of how it's been set for our other rating districts. So I've provided a table below that. And if you look to the bottom right hand corner of that table, the recommended prudent reserve that would achieve all of those damage exposures is 2.8 million. But what I would note is that the vast majority, if not all of our rating districts, have agreed a prudent reserve that is considerably lower than what that figure comes out at. Okay, and we'll talk to the prudent reserve matter a little bit more when we get to the paper on insurances further on in the agenda.
Okay, so Tom, that's work in progress still?
Correct, yeah.
So any questions on any of those items on the action list? Mayor Klein?
I just want to flag, I think there is a later paper about that, because to me, prudent reserve would be linked to your insurance excess.
That's correct.
So we'll have that discussion later.
Yes.
Thank you.
No further questions on the actions list? Okay, I'll move that items 1 to 4 be deleted and item 5 be carried over on the action list. Could I have a second for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Cummings. All in favour, say aye. Against? It's carried. Right, we'll move forward on to the next item, which is terms of reference, which is on page 21 to 32 of your papers. And Tom, that's your lead again on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this committee has had a terms of reference in place for some time now. What we're presenting to you now is an updated terms of reference to bring it into line with the terms of reference for other joint committees on the coast, those being Greymouth, Hokitika and Friends. And the principal change here is the change from an independent chair to a chair being either the mayor of the relevant district council or the chair of the West Coast Regional Council, and that rotates on a calendar that Chair had outlined before. So what we're asking here for is approval of those amendments and an instruction to staff to arrange for its signature stamp.
So I take it, thanks Tom, so I take it everyone's read those papers, and has anyone got any questions, or before I put the motion on that terms of reference?
So just a clear process from here is this recommends it to our respective councils who then formally ratify?
Yes, that's correct. Yep. But this joint committee will approve this today and make that recommendation today. So no further questions.
Just a matter of process, Mr. Chairman. Could I just say that while this is a joint committee, jointly with community, Bulla and regional council, the ultimate decision making on any matter rests solely with the regional council ultimately. That's quite an important principle actually, but respect that the Bulla members may want to consult their own councils and advise us on what their view is. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I can't see who that is. Colin, yep, can you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 points of significance. I hear what, I can't remember his name, sorry, my apologies for that. One about the independent chair, but the other one is very significant for me because a quorum under the old agreement did not include a community member. The revised agreement includes a quorum must include at least one community member. Very significant in my view. The other one is in terms of, and I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, if I'm correct in raising this now, but in terms of filling a vacancy, a community member vacancy. We, as you're aware, there was a call for nominations, not applications, back in June of last year. When the nominations were received by the due date, the nomination was for only one person, and I believe that one person spoke spoke previously at the public forum. Now, when we have an election, which is coming up soon, we take, for example, Reefton, where we have two ward representatives. If only two names, are put forward for nomination for Reefton or Nangahuva, my apologies, then they are accepted and nominated by virtue of the fact that no election is required. For whatever reason, this committee or somebody has decided that a nomination has been received, only one nomination was received, and yet it has been ignored because it was not accepted by BDC as a majority. Now, I come back to what I said before. A nomination is totally different to an application. And one only needs to read what Darryl Liu wrote, I believe, in the minutes. One nomination was received, and by my account, in the terms of democracy, one nomination means that nomination is accepted. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chair.
I think this is actually on a different matter than what we're speaking to, which is the joint committee papers here. So I don't really see that that's in there, but I take your point on the other point. But we're really discussing here today that this agreement. That's what that's the agenda item. Darryl, do you want to speak to that? Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I put it to the joint committee members whether they would like to add into the terms of reference that a quorum, as Councillor Reedy recommends, should include at least one of the community representatives to constitute the quorum.
I'll put that. Oh yeah. I want to get you again. Yep.
Yeah, I've already mentioned that. It's already included. It was not included in the agreement from 2022. It is now included. If you look, I think page about page 28 on the in the agreement, you'll find that it now includes that particular comment, and in terms of what a quorum is, and you'll find that it is in I can't remember where it was now.
Number 15.
Number 10, I think it is. Oh no, apologies. Hang on. Item 15, it says on here, item 15, the quorum of the committee shall be not less than 5 members and must include one or more members from each of the 2 councils, one or more from RC and DC, and one or more of the community members. It is already in there, which is what I mentioned before. That is a significant, in my view, adjustment to the agreement, and I applaud that.
So Colin, the question I've got for you: Are you agreeing that there should be one community members to make up that quorum? Are you disagreeing that we should?
I'm agreeing, Mr. Chair, that we have that in there, and that's okay. It must be in there.
Okay, no, that's good. I'll ask a show of hands then from this committee that they agree with that item 15, that the quorum of the committee shall be not less than 5 members and must include one or more members from each of the 2 councils, one or more from West Coast Regional Council, or one or more from BDC, and one or more of the community reps. Can I have a show of hands of those in favour of that?
Just one more question before you say it. Just the chair, obviously they're rotating around. Is he giving a casting vote? Is that in there or not? Does the chair vote at all?
No casting votes.
Stands, is it? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I think the terms of reference refer to the standing orders will be those of the regional council.
Right.
I'm not sure whether you have a casting vote or not.
No, we don't.
No, just with the other rating districts. when the chair is from the regional council, we have 2 council members. And when we're not, we'd only have 1 council member because the chair and the other council member. I'm just.
So I think, Councillor Cummings, the clarification is when on the committee you have 2 members from that community, which is a bullet on the Westport rating district. So if the 2 members here, if one of them happened to be the chair of the committee, then another representative from the regional council would be to make up the other person. That's the clarification. Yep. That's the same with all of them. So could I just show of hands that everyone agrees then of item 15? Just show all in favour? Against? Half the members? So, okay, so that'll stay in there then. So what we'll do, we'll take that back to the councils, but the recommendation that the Westport Rating District Joint Committee resolves to receive the report and approve the amendments to the Westport Rating District Joint Committee agreement, and instruct staff to arrange the terms of reference to be signed by the parties to the agreement. So that'll go to both the councils, but this is a recommendation. So can I have a move for that, please? Mayor Klein, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. All in favour say aye. Right. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Item number 7, reports. So this is the insurance report, and that's on page 33 to 38 of the papers. And Tom, you're up on this one again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will confess that I'll introduce this one, but given that Chantal was one of the authors of it and understands it far better than I do, there's a very good chance of one up calling on her advice to help me out here. Just a bit of a preamble. This is a paper that we have been presenting to all of the rating districts and the joint committees in the current annual round of meetings. It's a general update on what's been happening with the insurances that the regional council takes out on behalf of the rating districts for their infrastructure assets in the way of excesses and premiums and 1 or 2 other points. And this whole issue affects different rating districts in different ways. So for example, some rating districts, the value of their assets is so low, they're anywhere near the value of the excess, so effectively they wind up self-insuring. Other rating districts have far higher value assets, and the issue of insurance and therefore also prudent reserve is a much bigger one for them. For this rating district at the moment, the value of your assets right now is in the region of that 2.5 million, and your premium is relatively low, so it's less of an issue that what's being raised in this paper than it is for some others right now, but it will become increasingly more of an issue as time goes on. So the 2 key things that we want to raise, and again I'll get Chantal to jump in here if I've got this wrong, is providing you with some clarity on the excesses, i.e. the deductibles. So the first one is where damage or loss is suffered due to earthquake, natural landslip, tsunami, tornado, volcanic eruption, hydrothermal and geothermal activity, or subterranean fire. The excess is 250,000 for each and every loss. Where the damage or loss is suffered due to flood and windstorm, including storm surge, the excess is $1 million. Okay, that's getting up to be quite a significant figure these days, and this is where prudent reserve comes into play. In most instances, we would be, with an event of that magnitude, we would be looking at claims across a number of rating districts to meet that $1 million excess. But if it was just $1 million worth of damage to a single rating district, then that becomes a bit more of an issue from a affordability point of view. Did you want to add to that at all?
So I think one important thing to note here is that this is the West Coast Regional Council's deductibility. BDC has its own infrastructure insurance, and it also has the same excesses on its insurance policy. So 250K for pretty much anything except storm, flood, and wind, storm, flood, and storm surge. Yeah.
If I could add to that too, the $1 million excess is across one event. So in a 48-hour period, if we have a cyclone that goes right through the coast, and we have 4 different rating districts affected, then the $1 million excess will be spread over those 4 districts. So 250,000 basically each event, and that's over a 48-hour period. But however, if it's just isolated to Bulla or southwestern event, it's $1 million. What the other relevant point in here, which is in the papers too, that there is the opportunity to claim under NEMA on the NEMA insurance, and NEMA will pay out 60% on an event, with 40% have to come from the local share, but it has a condition attached to it that you shall either have your asset insured, or you shall have a proper prudent reserve that you can actually repair it. So that's something that the council have gone back to NEMA for real clarification on, because a lot of our rating districts that have a much smaller value have questioned that need for insurance and whether they self-insure. But we have pointed out to them that if you haven't got insurance or a suitable prudent reserve, that NEMA might actually not come up with it. So I hope that's a bit of clarity there. Has anyone got any questions? Joe?
I just want to run one scenario. As we know, earthquakes come in a swarm. Just what definition about one event? I just think you have one 6 months and 6 months later, and it's not enough time to build up your prudent reserve again. Should we, when you're considering that, how should that be handled?
I can only speak about from experience with the Christchurch earthquake and insurance claims there, and there was a magnitude threshold that was classified as a new event. So I can't remember what the threshold was, but every time we had an aftershock that was over a certain magnitude, that was classed as a new event.
So Daryl, and then Mark.
Councillor Cole has a question.
Just a point of clarification for me, it's 250,000 for a tornado and $1 million for a wind event, a windstorm. What's the subtle difference between a windstorm and a tornado?
I would have to ask Aon and come back to you.
Probably could most things.
I would imagine, Councillor Cole, that a windstorm wouldn't do too much damage to a stock bank. Mayor Klein, and then
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So just clarity around the let's assume it's a flood damage to the finished Westport flood protection. So the excess is $1 million. So NEMA would be in the gun for 60% of that.
Yep.
Okay.
I'd say the events are $1 million, so we wouldn't be able to claim because they're deductible. Yeah. But then NEMA would come in, we'd get 600 grand, it'd be 400 local. Okay. So that clarifies it.
Forming my case for the prudent reserve.
I think before I go to Daryl as well, I'm pretty sure that part of the DIA funding that we will be forced to insure, I'd imagine with the government input, but something. Daryl?
We are in touch and in discussions with NEMA at the moment, and I think the question around the earthquake one was a good one, so we can seek absolute clarification on that, because I want that written down and advised to West Coast Regional Council and then out to the joint committees. I think that's really important because earthquakes can have, as Mr. Blackwood knows, a very significant effect on our flood banks, given Edgecombe and other things. Yeah. The second thing is, and just really quickly, the definition of windstorm versus tornado, etc., comes from the Met Service. Thanks.
Just one other question that comes to mind is my understanding of the design for the flood walls. There's some of it that is lot more expensive than other parts. And is it feasible that you would establish a less than full cover for the flood scheme as a whole, noting that some of the urban areas might be really expensive to repair versus like sort of a bit that's just out in the middle of a paddock somewhere, it's potentially not as expensive, and that might soften the cost to some degree.
Pete Blackwood might be answering this.
Yeah, just through the chair, Mayor Klein. I think that should be recorded in the minutes, and that should be something that we should investigate. I can't give an authoritative answer at this time, but it is a worthwhile consideration.
So the way that the stop banks and flood protection scheme are being built and designed, it's in sections. So for example, the first section is McKenna's Bank, which is either near completion or has been completed. So I will be contacting our insurers to let them know that that now needs to come on board to be insured.
But it's a good point, which we can go away and consider.
Are there any further questions or discussion around this item? What the regional council looking for is a steer here that we're getting our support to go ahead with the insurance. Now that's going to come to our annual plan, but the insurances for all the schemes are paid up until November this year, and then the insurance will be renewed. But by that time we will have the clarification from NEMA, and but we're looking for an indication from all the rating districts, this being the last one of the meetings, of whether they support the insurance in that form. So the recommendation, any further councillor Cummings?
So I can confirm that both Organs Island and the Kawatiri Scour are on our insurance schedule, and that the estimated premium in this document includes Organs Island and Kawatiri Scour, but it doesn't include McKenna's yet. So the premium for next year might be slightly higher than what's indicated in attachment 1 to this paper.
Okay. Further discussion?
Happy to move that insurance is essential for the Westport flood protection scheme.
Thank you, Mayor Klein. Seconded by councillor McIntyre. All in favour say aye. Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item, item 7.2, Westport Flood Protection Scheme Update. That's on pages 39 to 46 of the papers. And one question.
No correction.
One correction. Yep.
Second paragraph, page 40. And Scott Bank, that's Roscoe Brothers, it's Roscoe Contractors.
Roscoe Contractors, yep. Okay. So Peter Blackwood, let you and Jordan, or you.
Thanks. This is a joint presentation. Stay on the slide just a sec. So it's myself, and it also is Jordan Mandry, the construction engineer.
So Jordan, you like to stand up, make yourself known to everyone here? So Jordan's.
We haven't identified you yet. Yeah. Jordan will be speaking to slide number 4 of mine. I've got 9. Okay.
You guys can see it, but
yeah. Do you want me to pause?
Yes, please. So please, yeah. People who are online, they can't see the slides.
That's cool.
No,
that's fine.
Yeah. Can you see the slides online, you guys? People online? Yeah. You can. Thank you. Just before we do, I just noticed that Mark Tinnis from NZTA is online too. So welcome, Mark. You're coming later.
Thank you.
Right. Yep. Yes, righto. Sorry, Peter. Floor's yours again.
Okay, I'll start again. So this is a combined report from myself and from Jordan Mandry, Project Construction Engineer. And Jordan is going to speak to slide 4 of my 9 slides. There are 3 slides at the tail, which I will not be presenting on there for information. So the second slide, please, Christine. Okay, so it's divided into 2 parts, pretty obvious. Progress to 31st of March 2025 and expected progress to 30th of June 2025. Next slide, please. Okay, progress to date. This is a general slide, just generally covering everything. So design progress is proceeding apace, and yeah, we're working on many fronts at present. Cats Creek and McKenna stop banks are completed, and Mr. Mandry will speak about those. I just want to make a comment at this point on Margaret Montgomery's use of the word temporary. These stop banks are designed so they're permanent. Someone else, might have been her, also asked if they were going to be maintained. I think there's maintenance about Cats Creek Drain. So the stop banks will be maintained, and they will be maintained under an asset management plan, which prescribes certain standards and frequencies of inspections and any repairs that would be needed. So they will be maintained. The only place where the word temporary came in was when Kiwi Rail wanted to issue a permanent for a temporary stop bank at Cats Creek. And after some considerable time, they issued a permit for a permanent stop bank, and we're very grateful for that. Avery stop bank design is completed. We're just into the fine tuning of the construction comments there, but I'll come back further. Consenting and construction on Upper Bulla stop bank, south of State Highway 67 bridge. That's held up whilst protection for Carter's Creek is resolved, and I'll talk more about that. The options reports on both Snodgrass and Carter's Beach have been completed, but needs further work on Carter's Beach. I'll come to that. Detailed flood maps have been provided to emergency management staff, and they include the 1 in 2,000 year flood, which is, so we need to know the size of the animal, what could happen for this town. This is really, really important. From my colleagues around New Zealand, they would want us to look at the probable maximum flood. But we're doing it in bite-sized chunks here. And for a river the size of the Bulla, the probable maximum flood will probably be 2.5 to 3 times the 100% AEP flood. So it is a very big flood, but we're looking at a 1 in 2,000 year flood at this point in time. Okay. Now, what was that? Oh, it's 11,000 cubics. And the, yeah. So now it's your turn. There you are.
All right. So two contracts that we let this year was Cats Creek. McKenna's Cats Creek was completed last year. That was only 100,000 or so. That was quite simple, short duration construction window. But McKenna's, that was publicly listed gets tender. Roscoe's won that, and they've been doing really well to date. I was actually quite surprised at how well they did, considering their price compared to the others. But no issues whatsoever. Coming in right on time when we said when the construction contract period finished, end of March, and it'll be definitely under budget. So we've got Avery's, like Pete was saying, Avery's design is, for all intents and purposes, complete. There's a few tweaks to the drawings. That's just to aid constructability. That will be let before June, and we have to have the contract awarded for that. But other than that, I don't have too much else to update.
So Jordan, while we're there, at Cats Creek, there's a bit of a hole that's between the railway embankment and through the rail corridor that's a bit incomplete. But I just want to point out that this members of the committee, we had a meeting the other day with adjacent landowners and Kiwi Rail. That hopefully will get a resolve to that to actually get permission to link that up. The concern around Kiwi Rail was damage to the abutment of the little bridge that's here. So, but I'm pretty sure hopefully we'll get a resolve to that and that'll tie that up. So, thank you. Carry on.
That will be a big relief.
Wheels move slowly.
Oh, they do. I'm grateful for what we've achieved thus far. It'll be easy. Right. Upper Bulla. So on to thank you, Jordan. And of course, you've got to correct my Roscoe, Bravista Roscoe Contractors Limited in that report as identified by Councillor McIntyre. So the ecological and landscape assessments are complete. That's included the ecology of the Parkland forested area just upstream of the bridge. We've consulted with Doc there. WSP have completed a draft report on impacts of flood levels at the Bulla Bridge and mitigation. That's because originally it's because confining the river does elevate flood levels there by a few centimetres or 10 centimetres. So there are options for mitigating that. NZTA have not indicated that they see that as a big problem at this point in time. I realise there's NZTA online, and we will be further communicating. So the most likely option is the removal of the old bridge abutment on the left bank. And we're gone to 2D modelling on that because we actually do need to see the maximum benefit we can achieve there. And that could, originally from 1D modelling, it's somewhere between 10 and 20 centimetres. Like these seem small numbers, but they are important to other agencies and the consenting agency. So the detailed 2D modelling is close. It was really difficult to calibrate that model, but it's running at the moment and we expect answers very soon. The other thing, of course, is I'll mention it again about the Carter's Beach, that we can't really build this stop bank because it sends, while it retains more water in the river, it also sends more water down to Carter's Beach, and government didn't pay for that. So we're still assessing and getting the cheapest option that does the job at Carter's Beach, and we're close on that, but waits for this 2D modelling to confirm it. Jordan Mandary's done a lot of the preferred alignments at 9 Mile. That's to minimise flood risk to houses there and include as many as we can on the inside of the stop banks. And we did receive letters that it would be concerning to see themselves outside the stop banks. And it was quite understandable for that area. There's very complex railway crossing there, which we're getting advice on that. Comprehensive program of geotechnical assessments is well underway. Boreholes and site investigations complete. And now they're doing the seepage and stability design and following that, the civil design. Plan is to build that. Can you go back? Sorry. Plan is to build that next year. And O'Connor's Rock is designed. The velocities in this river are very high, like most West Coast rivers, completely different to other parts of New Zealand. Their outside of bend velocities are almost 7 metres per second, so that needs really big rock. That's all cool. Now we'll go on to the next one. Thank you, Christine.
Peter, just really quickly. So Upper Bulla is State Highway Bridge.
State Highway Bridge to 9 Mile.
Yeah, cool.
And actually, at this point in time, I'd just like to mention one other thing that I missed from my general. That is the Aqualink groundwater modelling. It's not on this slide, but the Aqualink groundwater modelling has been essentially completed. That's a combined project between the climate change arm of Bulla, the stormwater arm of Bulla, and the design here to look at the groundwater levels. And we originally had money for a hydrostatic model, and if anything, that will overstate the levels. And the government put in 40K for a hydrodynamic model, and that's very close to completion. And that will be very useful both for our stability analyses. It will show the levels as they go up and down, and also for stormwater design. So that's true. So I'll now go on to the next one. Sorry, Christine. I meant to do that in the other one. Avery's. So ecological and landscape assessments are complete, and geotechnical and civil design and plans are completed. It's just final ticks on the squares to some very fine tuning, but they're done. We have a peer reviewer for our geotechnical design, Dr. Marianne O'Halloran of River Space. She has had a very eminent career in geotechnical design in many places in the North Island. So she's almost given her final tick. We did change course. At the culvert crossing at Avery's, we were going to incorporate that as a flood wall, transitioning into stop banks either side. But we have now decided to put the stop bank alongside there because it gives a safer engineering design, which is paramount to avoid underflow, and it will also be cheaper. And so we have minimised the intrusion into what we call the coastal marine area. We've kept it as reasonably minimal as we can, because that is of real importance to ecologists and to tangata whenua, and actually to myself as an engineer too. Consultations continuing, and we have had consultation with the tangata whenua on behalf of Laura Cobb, and the resource consents under preparation. Major culvert there has been sized, it's a twin culvert, and it's been procured, and a leachate study is underway to look at the transmission of leachate underground. We did detect one area of contamination that doesn't seem to be endemic in the whole thing. It's probably something that's just been dumped there, and that has what we call a DSI, and that will be assessed for mitigation. Floating lagoon is quite a challenge. So the vegetation and structures have been cleared, and it will enable detailed geotechnical design. There had been some lowering of parts of that floating lagoon by various individuals for different reasons, and that meant that the water would tip out prematurely from what it needed to. So those low spots have been topped up to give the best standard air in the meantime. The ecological environmental assessment is completed, and it contains skinks down there on the floating lagoon. So there's certain protocols that are important to deal with skinks and to assess if their rarity of the particular species. And so those studies are ongoing at pace. Finally, the contaminant assessment and mitigation is proceeding, realising there was a railway through there before. And so there are some hydrocarbons and other contaminants there. And so consultants have done a scoping exercise of the extent of this, and now they're doing further detailed tests. Again, they'll do a DSI, and they will then sort out mitigation for that. We're still hoping to build it next financial year. But floating lagoon, well, it has been a problem with the vegetation, and it also has obviously very high groundwater levels because it's right near the coast. Okay, that's floating lagoon. Tally's Bund. Previous seepage has been observed there during, I think it was the 2021 flood, and we had actually, I think, 5 different engineers on site by fluke a few months ago, including Dr. Marianne O'Halloran, and she wondered if it was a buried service. And so we've completed a ground penetrating radar survey. That's then fed into a structure needing an assessment, which has been carried out by WSP, and we'll know more soon. We are intending to procure the, we were going to put barriers, portable barriers across there, because otherwise it interferes with the port operations. But we are intending to procure the first 70 metres because we're pretty sure that the ground under that is okay, backed by tallies. We cannot put anything permanent there because it will interrupt their operations. So I've used these portable barriers before in the Lower Wanganui River. Snodgrass, we've had a detailed assessment of options presented to the community in January. That stop bank would protect 26 of the vulnerable properties. There are options, 26 of 30. There are options for the other 4. We heard on that from Paul Reynolds, and it was a tricky case of disclosure of information and when we consulted, and that will continue to happen. We don't want anyone to be disadvantaged and everyone to have the right information. So we've been busily working on other things. We've paused that briefly. So the funding options for the work are not confirmed because the government didn't fund this either, and they need assessment. That's all I think I should say on that at this point in time. So funding options are not confirmed and need assessment. We'll go on to the next slide. Carter's Beach options being costed. We had a very expensive option originally costed, and then we reviewed that, and Stuart Challenger of Coles came up with a cheaper option, but that raised levels at the State Highway 67 bridge by 7 centimetres. Might seem a small amount, but it did raise it by 7 centimetres. That's all part of being assessed under the two-dimensional modelling at the bridge. Consultation on this can start once we have more certainty on the viability of the option. We don't want to present any plans until we've got certainty that those things can actually be built. Buller Bridge to Tallies, North and Lower Orowaiti. I've spoken for a while, so I've lumped these all together. We're doing preliminary engineering concept reports are being prepared. We've got 2 big site visits on all of that later this week. Detailed geotechnical investigations are being scoped. We are hoping to have a driller for boreholes on site at the end of April to do those investigations. And of course, they will include test pits too. And in the Lower Orowaiti, there's a major culvert, another major culvert, the Cats Creek one, which has been sized, and that's being procured as well. And next slide. That's it. Oh no, next 3 months. Just have a 1 second, sorry. And next 3 months. Completion of the 2D hydraulic modelling. Carter's design firmed up and consultation commences. Upper Buller geotechnical design should be close to completion. And of course, that will be followed by the civil design. Resource consent lodged and hopefully granted for Avery's. Tenders, we intend to call tenders for Avery's and hopefully award. 2 culverts procured, at least 70 metres of the Tallies flood barriers that I spoke about. Geotechnical design for floating lagoon completed, and that will be a challenge, but I'm going to push hard there. Preliminary engineering concept reports completed and geotechnical investigations well underway on the Lower Buller, North End and Lower Orowaiti. That's me. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter and Jordan, for that very comprehensive report. Are there any questions? Peter and Jordan. No, I think it's great. The biggest question I've got is, it's great to see McKinna's actually completed the stage on time and on budget. I just can't wait for the next tenders to be called and get underway. So thank you for the report.
I was just going to wonder if Peter wanted to comment on like the completion of McKinna's and those little pop-ups down the lagoon, because my understanding of how it all works is that they are providing a immediate level of protection to the community. I'm just thinking, we've got heavy rain warnings out this week. It's not like nothing's been achieved in terms of a lot of this is forward work, but some of that stuff has, a moderate scale flood has actually.
Sorry.
In a moderate scale flood, it has
maybe the next one
already improved things for us.
Yeah, they have. Oh, don't worry, Christine. Yeah, we have modelled with the with McKenna's in place, and it does already lower flows into town. Definitely lowers flows into town. Otherwise, those flows would go right through Avery's. That's amazing where they get to. And then we've modelled McKenna's and Avery's together in a 50-year flood. It's really good. Some water still comes across from the floating lagoon, but no, they do provide that immediately, and we're certainly looking at, we could multi-purpose those flood barriers when we get them.
Thank you. I just thought it's worth noting that, a lot of this is, people looking at this might think, how this is all still yet to happen. But I think it's just good to note that there's some little quick wins along the way, and that there is some protection from that already.
You see the impact of McKenna's on the flood maps. Yeah.
Peter, would you be able to just talk about even just the small amount of flood banking that we've done at Catts Creek, and when we plug that gap, in an emergency we'll plug it, but how many houses that is protecting?
I'm not sure how many, but it is several streets.
Yeah, it could be many tens of houses, in excess of 50. I've heard, that even
that's right.
Even that flood banking gives immediate protection too. Thanks.
Yeah, and it was a quick win. Yeah.
Okay.
Could you just clarify your words? You said some of these stop banks could be multi-purposed when they're complete. What did you mean by that?
I'm talking about the flood barriers. The flood barriers that we're intending to purchase for the Tallies Bund, but at the Tallies end, they could be repurposed somewhere else. And I understand in the 2021 floods, some barriers were used as well in that. So the ongoing discussions with the emergency management people too on that. I think the hospital was protected. Yeah.
An example of those barriers are in the window at the old BNZ building or the now council, West Coast Regional Council building.
Councillor Cummins?
Yeah, Peter, the geotechnical design, that's all to do with the liquefaction, isn't it?
Yeah, liquefaction and seepage. Liquefaction of the ground underneath, and particularly seepage going through the stop banks. And also the stability of the batters, if they're going to slump or not. Yeah. And for example, just give an example, a river that's up and then suddenly drops because there's still a lot of water in the bank, that can mean that face will slide out. Yeah. So it covers all of those issues. Yeah.
Other councillors online, and Mark, no questions from you guys? All happy? Great.
Colin's got
I think it's an exciting time at the moment. Obviously, seeing the detail, and obviously that's where a lot of this discussion will lay. But it's great that you've got someone like Mark Healy, as I understand, for WSP doing that river work, which has got a huge amount of experience. I know he's been speaking to equally WSP who work for us on our structures asset management. So they have connected, they have looked through the options. They all look, in my mind, fairly realistic and positive for what we can do. Obviously, that discussion that sort of also unfolds around Carter's Beach is one we're just watching as well. But again, I think they're working through solutions, and I'm sure that can be achieved. So yeah, I think it's just where we would expect to be, and hopefully, we can work together and achieve that aim. We want to obviously ensure that the state highway isn't compromised, because we all need that access into the town. You're working to that end. So I think, together we can achieve what's needed for the town. So great.
Yeah, so Mark Healy of WSP, who's been working on the bridge options and some other options, has been carefully coordinating with Maura Wainham of your organisation. And
she's in my team. Maura, I just spoke to Maura, and she's comfortable where things are heading at the moment. Mark Healy spoke to Ben Beatty at our structures maintenance team as well. They've looked at just the feasibility of raising it, which seems possible, extending the approaches, putting a spillway through. I think it's eminently achievable. I guess be a bit of work on both sides. 7 centimeters does seem very accurate, but equally the modelling, the detail behind that, you have to just go through whether that could actually be needed, or whether you go obviously to say 20 centimetres to make enough headroom. That's the biggest concern from us, is that freeboard, so that in a big event we don't catch any debris and then we get scour and then we could lose the bridge that way. But again, that's just what we'll be looking at as we work through that detail.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for you recognise that. Yeah.
Councillor Reedy, you have a question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if it's related to this particular one, but there was about 1.5 million or so put aside by central government for raising at-risk houses within the Bulla. And I'm not sure if we are covering that off here, or if it's part of Resilient West Coast or Westport or whatever. So is there any update on that at some stage? 2 years has almost gone by, and I'm not aware of any houses being identified as being or requiring raising. You just have an update on that, please.
Mayor Klein, do you want to answer that?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so that's the adaptation fund, which is $2 million originally appropriated as part of the Resilient Westport work. That has been a work in progress by the Resilient Westport Committee. There are papers on tomorrow's agenda to further progress that work, to develop policy and the like around how that fund may be distributed. The key point to date had been needing some clarity on the final design and alignment of the flood protection to correctly identify what properties would be in scope for access to that fund. So definitely a work in progress. The funds have not been drawn down there, but they're earmarked for that purpose, and we'll work on that.
Thank you. Councillor Cummings, do you have a Councillor Reid, are you happy with that answer there?
If I may, Mr. Chair, it's just that almost 2 years has gone by since at the time the leader of the Prime Minister was down here in Westport and announced, I think it was May 23, the funding, central government funding. Almost 2 years has gone by and we haven't seen anything yet. So just how long is it going to take us to take policy, make policy, and put some urgency into this matter? I'll just leave it at that. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so as I said, the information required to inform who has access to that fund is dependent on what properties are protected or not by the flood protection. So once that's nailed down, we can then, it'll be a once and done sort of program of distributions from that fund, we expect. It's not going to be a large fund to recompense people as much as they probably may need, but it'll go some way towards some properties. But until we identify exactly the properties, it's difficult to come up with the criteria that will be applied to fairly and evenly distribute that. And we're taking learnings from other parts around New Zealand out of Cyclone Gabriel in terms of how it was done in Hawke's Bay and Auckland, and I think we've used variations of both of those to start inform potential policy that we might use here.
Councillor Cummings, then the CEO.
I've just got one question for Peter about the Carter's Beach. Carter's Beach protection, that will include preventing flooding of the airport, will it?
No, it doesn't. On advice actually from Department of Internal Affairs, it would have to be quite a high stopping to protect the airport and quite expensive, and they advised against it. They did understand why we would include Carter's. I would need even more money for the airport at this point. So I'm sorry, it's not in it present. Yeah.
Okay, that's all right.
The consultation that took place for the 21 LTP provided a map. The option that was selected by the Westport community went for the 10.2. And if you have a look at that map, it includes Carter's Beach, but not the airport, and it includes Snodgrass, and it includes the Westport town.
Thank you. CEO, then Colin, Councillor Reedy, one more question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to speak in support of Mayor Klein. The West Coast Regional Council team and the Buller District Council team are working very collaboratively and jointly on all the issues, including the overall scheme, but also the adaptation fund. It's really important that, as Mr. Blackwood has outlined, that the scheme design is advanced in full across the whole scheme to at least concept design, to actually understand what houses are going to be left, on the other side of the bank and hence not protected. It's not until we complete all of that that really we can pass that information on to Buller District Council, and with that absolute confidence of knowing where the scheme is going and what it's going to protect and what it's not, that the adaptation fund can be fairly evaluated and apportioned fairly and equitably to those houses that may not be protected, and we need to complete that work to enable that dependency to go ahead. Thanks.
Councillor Reddy, I'll allow one more question and then we're going to move on. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm prepared to move that we receive the report and note the attachments.
thank you, Councillor Reddy. Seconded by Councillor Cole. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Item 7.4, which is on pages 47 to 69 of your paper, and this is Westport Classification Progress Report. And John Philpott's here to talk to this today. But first of all, I'd like to just make out, and I read on page 47, it's essential that readers of this report and associated presentation know that 1, this agenda item is intended as an information and discussion piece, and that 2, no decision is requested currently by the West Coast Regional Council of the Westport Rating District Joint Committee, and 3, a wider rating scheme review of all rating schemes in the region is scheduled for in year 3 of the current 2024-34 long-term plan, that's i.e. the financial year 26-27, and a regional contribution be given consideration as part of the wider rating scheme review. Any recommendations as of a product of the wider rating scheme review will form part of discussions with rating districts. And 6, no changes to the current rating base are likely before financial year 26-27 at the earliest. So this is a discussion point, and for the media, this is not actually setting this in concrete. It's a discussion on what could possibly happen. Daryl, do you want to say a few words before?
I would, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for reading out those caveats which preempt this presentation by John. I think it's really, really important that those caveats are understood, and that this is your first look at where we could go. I'd like to introduce John. John is a consultant that has had many years of experience in rating classifications for flood schemes, and many of us who are working on it have known John for a long time and recognise his expertise in this area. It is really important that what John is going to talk to you about today is something that the West Coast Regional Council is going to have to consider across all its flood schemes, because some of the concepts and principles that modern flood scheme classification that John will talk to you about may need to be fairly and equitably apportioned across other flood schemes on the coast. Hence, this is going to be a year's worth of work and consultation and work with this joint committee, but it will lead eventually to a special consultative process where all the community can have their say on this, leading up to 30 June next year and our renewal of our LTP after year 3. So that's really important. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll hand over to John. Thank you.
Everyone. Thanks. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to present this, Mr. Chairman. Just a bit more. Describe this. The development of the rating system has come out of my head to a large extent, but my head's come out of 40 years of river engineering experience. And I've undertaken in excess of 20 different classifications from very small schemes to very big schemes. Like the low Manawatu scheme, which is a huge one, and the Manawatu, it took about 2.5 years to do that. Very complex exercise and modelling, and we haven't been able to do that in this environment. But all those things I've learned over the years have allowed me to make what I believe quite good, logical recommendations. So that's where I sort of lead from. So turn the page. Where are we? Yeah, having issues with you. Okay, fine. All right. So wait a minute. All right. Okay. I'll probably talk a little bit while it's going. The rating legislation has changed from when these schemes were originally set up. I don't know the full history behind the rating around the Westport scheme because I haven't ever gone that way. I starting afresh every time. But the legislation, the rating under the 41 Act, the Auckland Rivers Control Act, had some severe limitations on how you could develop rating systems. Unfortunately, that's all been scrubbed, and we now develop rating systems under the Local Government Act and the Local Government Rating Act, which have a lot more flexibility, which makes it a lot easier not only develop something that's robust, also allows you to develop something which is more understandable. The old rating systems, you could either be A, B, C, D, or F. A often incorporated many things. It incorporated the benefit you got from flood control, from erosion control, from drainage, from all sorts of things. We can now separate those benefits out. It's not very, the Westport scheme is relatively simple in that respect, but it's just worth understanding that we have those flexibilities, and then the other schemes we develop, we can make them much more understandable. In my experience is when people see their rate demand, they might have 4 or 5 lines on their rate demand, where historically they only had 1, but now they'll understand what each of them means. They'll say that they can see what they're paying for drainage, they can see what they're paying for flood protection, and that they make it so much more understandable. My experience is no one ever likes paying rates, but once they understand what they're paying for, they generally go away and happily pay, well, unhappily pay. Yeah. One of the advantages of the Local Government Act and Local Government Rating Act is that they remove the restrictions on the number of rating classes. I'm looking in this scheme recommending that we have 9 for capital and 9 for maintenance. That was a number. It's what came out of the calculations. Now, one thing, we can increase the number of rating factors that we use in the rating system. We're no longer restricted to area. Yeah, go over a couple. Yep. Page 3. So we're no longer restricted to the number. You either used to have that either in area or in capital value or in land value. Now we can mix and match it. We can do some things on capital value, some things on area. In the scheme, I'm basically recommending we do on capital value, but it also allow the revision, although it also allows some uniform annual charges. There's a bit of benefit in doing that. In other schemes that we develop around the region, if I get involved in those, I'm trying to retire. I think there could be opportunities to mix and match those a lot more. Now we got to keep on number 4. All right. We're getting there. Right. Hey, stop there a minute. We can, so you, as I mentioned, you can rate a parcel of land on more than one rating category, so you can layer them up. It's a real interesting, a useful concept. And as I mentioned, uniform annual charges, which I'll come to. And the next little picture shows this concept of layers, which I think are interesting. Just for example, when they developed the Low Manawatu scheme, they actually analysed it in layers, but then were forced to squash the layers into things called A and B and C, and they lost all this wonderful data. So here we have, this in Westport scheme, it's not a big issue, but in other schemes we might find it is. And each layer can have a number of differentials in it. All right. For the Westport, where we got to? Okay. For the Westport, Direct benefit, where we've got flood control provided by the stop banks. So direct benefits achieved in the scheme through the construction of flood control schemes, of flood protection works, of erosion control works, and then the other issue we need to consider is how we deal with rural and urban areas. But the erosion control works in the scheme, while we're not going to rate separately for those or identify those separately, the only reason I think we're doing them is to protect the stop banks. That would be fundamentally the reason why the protection would really. So it's all the cost of managing the river is really part of the stop bank cost. So I've dealt with it. Next one, indirect benefit. Concept that everybody in the rating area, and the rating area being the wider rating area, not just Westport, receives indirect benefit. If you live in Karamea, your only place really to go is to probably see your bank or your lawyer or your hospital and things like that, Westport. Unless you want to drive through the floodwater, that might be there and get to Greymouth. And the other concept, the level of indirect benefit will vary depending on where you are. If you live close in to Westport, I'll talk more about this, close into Westport, you probably actually work in town, and there's a real benefit from that. Next one, the contributor rating. A lot of the schemes, the bigger schemes I've been involved with, where the government required you to consider the contribution that the catchment might have on the need for the scheme. So if there's an awful lot of rural farmland that's been developed, removed all the trees, and you get more runoff, or there's a big urban area somewhere that's increasing runoff, then those people causing that problem or creating the need for the stop banks should contribute. In the Westport scheme, as I'll discuss it here, there's actually very little land upstream of Westport that's changed much. There's a lot of land up there, but it's all in natural state. Nothing's changed. There's a little bit of farmland really get up the around Nangahura, but the amount of change to the runoff in a big event isn't very great. And for that reason, I'm recommending we don't do it. We don't add that complication to the rating system to gain very little money. Now there's the next one. Then also the regional benefit is something which Daryl's talked about. I don't think it forms part of this rating system. It's a decision the council has to make, collects the amount of money from the regional ratepayers and gets fed back into the schemes to reduce the cost that the schemes have to pay. So I don't see it as a factor in the rating system as such. Next one. In terms of defining the indirect benefit areas, clearly we know what. Well, I'm sort of getting less confident about my red line after listening. I'm not quite sure where the red line is finally going to be, but it's roughly there around Westport. Snodgrass there's 26 houses in there that have been identified as be protected by some physical means. And Carter's Beach Bank, I've gone with this dotted line because we don't know quite what it's going to look like yet. But we've had to make some, at this stage, we make some assessments of what that might cost just to allow us to develop the rating system further. Page. For the end of, so go back a step. So they are the direct benefit areas by definition. They are the guys who get flood protection. Those houses get flood protection. No one else really is getting flood protection. All the other benefits they're getting are indirect because those people are getting flood protection, or those communities are being protected. So if you turn on to the next page, now looking at the indirect benefit areas, I sort of looked at those and where do they sit? And I think there are there's another one. There's one more down there. Yeah, that on all them yeah, and one more. Well, I'll put them all up. One more. Yeah, and another line on that. There we are. It's all there. So we've got you've got the central bunch of property either side of upstream or north and south of the Westport central area, and I think they're in the high benefit. So north of Bulla up to the Mokanui River, which is in other words the Karamea Bluffs, where the end of that flat land finishes, and everything south of Westport down to about Charleston. So you have to draw the line somewhere, and somewhere in there, those people, I believe, get more relatedness to Westport. They're more likely shop, or not shop, but a lot of them work in Westport. there's obviously, clearly a line could be drawn anywhere down there, but you've got to pick one. And one thing I'm good at is picking them. Because I pick the right one's not a question, but I believe you've got to make a decision at some point in time. So, because once you're going north, clearly once you hit the Karamea Bluffs, the world changes up there. You sort of climb up into the hills and then you next drop down into the next floodplain where our people live and farm. And that's in the Karamea patch. Now, everybody in those two first ones are receiving a high degree of benefit, I believe. In the Karamea area, I've got them as medium versus the other ones being low, because they obviously can't get out of the region without coming through an area that's protected by flood protection. Yeah. And they're a long way. Are they going to drive to Greymouth? Probably less likely to. So I've pushed them at a medium level. And then the people south of Charles are down to the Fox River and up the Buller, sort of as far as an Angry Landing. Now, where you stop that area is another question. And I think that people decided that Angry Landing was a good mark. Anybody further south than that would probably go to Greymouth. Again, the line can be in many different places, but it's somewhere there. You got to pick one. Reef is on your.
Yeah. So can I just comment on that? So, look, I understand, the team understands that Reefton is part of the Buller district. We'd purposely discounted Reefton from the classification because Reefton can access Greymouth and doesn't have to come back through Westport. Okay, that was the reasoning.
So I'd forgotten there was someone said why we hadn't done that. Yeah. Oh yeah, there's a line somewhere. Yeah, I mean there's no difficulty changing those boundaries. It's not a difficult exercise to add those in if the council and the committees agree to do so. The amount of money you're going to collect from those extra ones, it's really small. Yeah, you're in a low category. And the amount of low is actually remarkably low amount of money you draw out of those areas. Yeah. Turn the page. Now, with respect to direct benefit, now I've changed the wording on this first line because it doesn't sound much, but it's significant. What I would like that first line to read is it is proposed that 2/3 of the total rate required will be funded by those properties receiving direct benefit. Now that first line might look like that, but I've thought about it an awful lot, and it doesn't mean that. Because in other words, so we take the total rate required to provide flood protection, and 2/3 of it will be put against the direct benefit areas. They will also receive indirect benefit, those areas, and therefore will pay a little more for the recognition of the indirect benefit they get. So direct beneficiaries pay more than 2/3 of the total rate. I believe that the direct benefit is largely related to, the way I consider it, is related to the protection of your assets and not protection of the services that support you to live in that environment. That's indirect benefit. So people who live in town receive indirect benefit. People who live out of town receive indirect benefit. So when I had those areas north of the Buller and south of Charleston, they include Westport. The general principle is that all properties in each of the three districts, three direct benefit areas we rated using one differential. Clearly within Westport itself, there'll be people who are slightly higher, slightly lower. Some will get more flooded in a different events than others. But generally throughout New Zealand, when there are urban areas being protected, they consider that everybody's receiving the same benefit. Palmer's Law's like that. I imagine the whole Hunt Valley's like that. Big urban areas, Christchurch will be like that. It gets very complicated if you don't do that. There are a number of properties around the fringes of the red line that span over the line. Now look carefully at those. I can't remember how many there are, about 30 of them, I think. And most of them, all but one, all their main capital asset is on the dry side. there's one quite big farm that sort of sits out the side here somewhere, that spans both sides with capital assets on both sides. And then I think we're going to have to get a valuer to go and decide what proportion of the capital value of that particular type block of land sits where. But I did it for all the others. I think the calculation I did, just looking at land values and capital values and apportioning them, will probably be, for all intents and purposes, accurate enough. This rating system is not a purely accurate process. There's no precise way of getting all this. So as long as it's reasonable and near enough, it's generally considered okay. So that covers that direct benefit. Then the indirect benefit, next page. Suppose the property receiving indirect benefit will pay a third of the total rate. That's the other third. We're recognising that that will also be spread over everybody, not just those who are indirect. Not just, sorry, includes all the indirect, but also encompass people who are receiving direct benefit. Now, each indirect benefit area will have a separate differential in the whole crunch of things. And I suppose, and this is where I came, when you're rating for indirect benefit, if you just an example of up the coast, there'll be a little house somewhere sitting on the edge of the sea, not worth very much. Its capital value is remarkably low. If you rated them only on capital value, they'd pay a tiny amount of money, but they do rely on the hospital, the dentist, the lawyer, the bank. So in order to recognise the benefit they do get, I sort of think it's fair that we split the amount of money we're going to collect off from on a direct benefit from capital value, on a capital value and a uniform charge basis, and picking that split. And I just think the numbers look reasonable. If you say we'll collect 40% of it, click the next couple down, 40% of it on a uniform annual charge and 60% on a capital value basis. And that sort of gave an amount of money on a uniform annual charge that looked reasonable. Reasonableness is one of the things that it is worded somewhere in the Act. The contributing rating categories I've mentioned before, I've covered that one really. That I think the change that in a big flood, the change that the contributors are making is infinitesimal, and on that basis you can't justify it, in my opinion. Capital works. This is interesting. How we deal with how do we split the capital works costs? Now, the decision that somebody, I think it was the government or somebody in the government, decided that we'd only subsidise Westport and not these other parts of Westport, to me is kind of odd. And if you do work out what it costs to protect Westport and rate them for that and subsidise that, work out what the cost of protecting Snodgrass and protecting Carters separately and rate them accordingly, the numbers get silly. To the point that you end up, people in Snodgrass end up having to pay about $2,000 a year as a rate if they're having to pay for their works. Now, I think it's my opinion that Westport, Snodgrass and Carters are one big community. You can't separate them out, really. We all need each other. And so I sort of looked at, I'm trying to get my online here, that I first looked at what would be the rates for all those if you took away the subsidies entirely. How much, and that would pick a level of rating, assuming you had all these three costs, the Snodgrass, Westport and Carters, add all those costs together, divide them by the total capital values of those, and you come up with a number. And I think that sets a base value that each of them should pay. And then you take the Westport bit and subsidise it. And that brought the Westport down, recognising their subsidies. But it also, in effect, Westport community subsidise the other ones, but the subsidies are targeted back on Westport. It's depends on which part. I mean, you could say it's the non-subsidised part of what they pay is going to the other communities. If you don't do that, I can't see the protection and something like it just becomes too expensive for Snodgrass. That's not going to fly, in my opinion. there's that whole point of, and that's, I've developed the whole rating system with that concept that Carter's and Snodgrass and Westport are one community. And I've developed a rating systems analysis tool that deals with all that really well. It took a while to figure out how to do it. Now the next page is they're all the costs that I've had to manage around. No, they aren't the final costs for sure. They won't be that. There'll be some variations on that. But I had to pick some numbers to get a handle on what the rates were going to be. So you've got the capital costs. There's the August Island. I think there's still a loan outstanding on August Island that I've factored in there. There's the council subsidy and the government subsidy, and you end up with a capital cost that you've got to fund. And then I worked out an annual loan repayment based on the Peter, your corporate services man. Oh, sorry, Miller. Their figures were, what was it, 4.3% in 30 years, I think it was. And I calculated what the annual loan repayments would be. And then there's this annual maintenance. Now, the annual maintenance is based on 1% of the annual cost. 1% of the value, I think it was. 1% of the value. That's where those numbers came from. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. You add capital works, you get capital works costs and August Island, you get the 2.6. That's where that comes from. No, it doesn't quite. It's near enough. Yeah, but basically and I, from the rating system, I've assumed that we'll be doing the full maintenance program. It's not going to happen like that. It's going to get staged in over time. In year one, you won't have to rush out and do a lot of maintenance because it'll all be finished and ready to go. And eventually, you'll have to wind up your maintenance program, and you'll get there. But I've assumed, for the purpose of this exercise, that we're into year 10, whatever it might be. You'll be paying your annual loan repayments and your capital works maintenance. And there are some engineering fees in there as well. There'll be nothing organised itself, so you've got to pay for those. If we turn the page, there's that. Turn the page, there's the capital works interest rate we've assumed, and the 30-year loan. Then we've got suppose that direct benefit rate for flood protection will be spread uniformly across the whole protected community. That's what I said before. And in terms of Snodgrass, I felt that Snodgrass are not going to have the same level of protection. The Westport and Carter's are going to have 100-year climate change adjusted. Where RCP6, where Snodgrass is not. Snodgrass is going to have 100-year with no allowance for climate change. So they have and no freeboard. So they have a lesser standard of protection. So, but I sort of thought that 85% differential on them was probably a sensible number, recognizing that they get lots of benefit for a lot of time. It's only in the very rare event. The rare events are, by their nature, they don't come very often, so your losses, even though they'll get a big loss at that time, the probability, multiply that by probability, it just gets lost. It becomes very small over time in the long picture of things. So I feel 85%, but again, that's a number that's manageable. It can be manipulated around if anybody had a better idea. I felt it produced a number that made some reasonable sense. Now the subsidy for, as I say, the subsidy for Westport will be applied over Westport Township only. If you turn the page now, this is interesting what this comes up with. So this is an indicative direct benefit rate. So it shows what the impacts of the non-community approach with the community approach. So if you look at the middle line, Westport, the community, if you have the community approach, you can see the levels of rating there. For Westport, it'd be $189. Without the community approach, Westport would pay less. So you can only see from that Westport's probably paying about $27 each per $300,000 property to have a community that's going to survive. But you can clearly see it doesn't make a lot of difference to Carter's, but you can see Snodgrass becomes at $2,189 a year. I can't see that flying anywhere. You've never seen a rate that high on a property on a capital value basis for a really small property. Turn the page. No, that's a direct benefit rate they're going to pay. On top of that, they've got to pay their indirect benefit rate. And here's a split between, these are rates all based on a $300,000 property, because I looked at what is the average house in Westport valued at, and a lot of them are around about 300,000. So that's why I picked that number to give a useful figure. So for the high indirect benefit areas, they'll have a $10,000 per 300,000 capital value, and they'll pay a uniform annual charge of $8. The subsidy comes into that. That's why they're lower. The high indirect benefit other people, there you can see what happens there. So people north and south of the Buller, no, they don't pay a direct benefit rate. So they pay $54 indirect benefit rate and a $47 uniform annual charge. And you can see the other figures for when you get to the medium, the people in Karamea and the people in the more outlying areas, so south end to up the Buller Gorge Way. So the average property up there on that basis for indirect benefits is going to pay about $17 for $300,000 property. It doesn't look like something that scare you off, but it all helps. It all helps pay. It recognises the benefit that having Westport protected provides them. Then I looked at, so I separated out in the rating system the rates for capital works and the rate for maintenance, because capital works will eventually get paid off, but maintenance will carry on forever. And then people can see what they're paying for the capital. So they'll get a separate rate for capital works and a separate line of the rate demand for maintenance works. That's the proposal. So maintenance works will be set annually based on the cost of program works. So we don't know anywhere near what they'll be, but I've assumed that's all going to be in place at this stage. Rates will be applied over all rateable properties on a differential basis, much the same as the direct benefit as the indirect benefit. Pretty well, the maintenance stuff almost mirrors the direct benefit in terms of the way I worked it out. Maintenance rates will be applied over direct benefit and indirect benefit rates in the same proportion as the capital works rates, so I said a second ago. The figures on the next slide assume that let's say the full maintenance program has been undertaken. So the indicative direct benefit maintenance rate. So people who live in Westport are paying their direct benefit rate, their indirect benefit rate, and their maintenance rate. All right, so they can see what they're paying for. So you can see that if you live in Westport, you're going to pay $73. Carter's Beach $73, but Snodgrass is a bit less because their protection standards are less. When you turn the page again, you can see what the indirect component of maintenance is going to be. It looks a bit complicated, but it actually all works. There's a mistake on that page. On the first line where it says $20, that should read 9. Gonna make one mistake. So again, but you see on the next page is the more relevant one. You can see when you add all these things up together, a $300,000 house in Westport pays $311 now, and if they weren't being subsidised, it would be a lot more than that. Carter's Beach gives a better idea of what it would be. Carter's Beach will pay $613 because the government decided not to subsidise them. Snodgrass is a bit less because they're getting 85% sort of benefit there. If you live in that area to the north or to the south of Westport, down to Charleston or up to the Karamea Bluffs, we're looking at about $130 per year for a $300,000 property. That includes all the bits, all the indirect benefit arising from capital and the indirect benefit arising from maintenance. And if you live up Karamea, $40 $300,000, and the low indirect benefit is pretty small. Now, I've redigged those numbers. 331. Should I got the one in front of me? I've redigged them more than once. The right number, my latest figures on those, they're not much different. Westport would be $338 if you want to amend your page. Carter's Beach will be $556. Snodgrass will be $495. And then there's some big shifts. I don't know how I got these wrong, but high benefit will be one will be $76, and the other two are correct. It's a pretty complicated looking spreadsheet. I've poured over this endlessly. I'm convinced I've got it right now. So they're not as bad as the high lyric benefit is not as bad as I first pointed out there. So things yet to complete. Or the one I had on here that I have done it now. The further consideration of benefits to rural properties receiving flood protection. In that area upstream of Westport, you've got that big chunk of farmland in there. There, I thought, now how do you relate farmland to capital asset loss, like in a house or a building? And I did some work, sent a bit of work. We had agricultural economists do some work. We did the Low Amount 2 scheme, and we looked at the loss of a dairy farm if it was flooded for, say, 4 days. And then I updated those figures with information I got off Dairy New Zealand website on the losses or the production there, the losses you get in, or the production you get in a dairy farm, and therefore the losses you get if you can't farm it. And I managed all that around, looked at the average annual loss that a farm would occur, and compared that with the average annual loss that a $300,000 house in the community the loss would be for them. And I got that information off another study that the council had commissioned, and they came out very similar. I was kind of surprised. I was looking for a differential, but there wasn't one. They were very close. Now, it could be something worth putting a bit more effort into and getting economists to have a look at that a bit more, but I don't know that it's worth it at the end of the day. So I got, so we need to just maybe finalise that some more if we want to. We finalise the edges of various indirect benefit rating areas. Yeah, where we draw those, we just people reactions to how far south do you go, how far north do you go? Well, north's pretty just because it stops at the river up there, at the Kaihiki, is it? Going up to Angahura or somewhere, you could move that around and going south from down to the Fox, there's room to move that boundary. I don't think there's any right answer, but I don't think they're wrong either. We finalised the cost of protection and properties protected in Snodgrass and Carter's. Peter's still working on that, but the process of adjusting my rate figures is really simple. Now I've got things working right. It's just a matter of putting the numbers in. I understand that they're working on an analysis, redoing their council's rating database, which they'll find errors in those databases for sure. So when we rerun the analysis and work out all the capital values in each of those zones, the numbers will change a bit. They will adjust the numbers, but I don't expect the numbers to change very much at all. I've got my final draft. My final draft reports on 30. I'm always on time. It was on 31st of March, as agreed. And well, we got complete the review of the West Coast property database. Got to be done. And we rerun the data. So Peter's got to finish his work. They're going to finish the rating of the database, and then we can. And as long as there's no changes to what I've done here, then we're now on there.
Righto.
All right.
Thank you,
It all
John.
makes sense?
Yep, it does. Thank you very much for that comprehensive report. Look, like I said, this is an information and discussion piece, and it's early days. There's a lot of work to go on the bridge. So I'm going to put a recommendation, and that's to receive the presentation and note to further meetings we held between West Coast Regional Council and Westport Rating District Joint Committee on the development of a new rating system for Westport. Could I have a second for that? Yep. Councillor Cole, Councillor McIntyre. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Look, one comment I've got, and I think we've got to push on because we've still got 6 items to carry on. But, when I went to school, when I was a young fella, the Buller River started its life at Lake Rotoiti in the Nelson region. There's a hell of a lot of modification right up through that area, and the Ngahua, the massive catchments and way up through there. But I know we can't capture them, but I'll open it up for discussion, but we probably limit it because we've got a lot of items to get through, unless we order tea. Councillor,
just one quick question. How do we approach the other rating districts that are going to be encompassed with this?
No,
Snodgrass and
Oh, they will rating districts. You can be in a drainage district and receiving benefit from the West Coast scheme quite separately.
But Mokanui is not drainage.
No, can I answer that? Okay, so look, this is a concept that we developed for Westport. If we're going to do this, we need to think more widely about the whole rating district review right across the West Coast in our 23 schemes. That will all be bundled up in a special consultative process. Okay, it has to be legally, and it will be open for submission for all rating schemes to comment to us on. Thank you.
Can I?
Councillor Howard, first, and
just one on that one. All throughout New Zealand, there will be big schemes, big flood control schemes that overlay drainage schemes. They don't have to be merged together. They can be overlaid. So you'll get a rate demand for recognising the different things you get from different places. Yeah. Sorry.
Councillor
I was just wondering if there's any of these mechanisms that allows for funding. I was thinking of the Crown assets like your hospitals and schools, and that the Crown's been protected from our flood walls, and therefore they should also be contributing to the maintenance and that. Is there anything in your knowledge that allows
we looked at that for a long time around the Manawatu in terms of can we get the road authorities, the rail authorities, they get huge benefit. And the answer was no. I don't think you can any justification for the forest park. That's just natural ground. There's nothing there. But we've flogged the dead horse, unfortunately. But there may be something new I don't know about.
That was actually on your last slide, that question too, that we never had.
Yeah, true.
Thanks. So a question from me around the assumptions around the loan. So you're working that out over a 30-year loan, which is what, 10 million odd, isn't it, for the ratepayer share?
Local shares 10.2.
Yeah, and so what, you're assuming that's fully paid down over 30 years, or is it interest only, or?
I assume fully paid. No, my calculation is fully paid down.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there any reason why it has to be fully paid down? Why that can't be either a longer term or interest only and just carries on? That's a question to
Mr. Chairman, the term of the loan and those questions that the Mayor poses are all could be wrapped up in various different options that would come through this joint committee and then ultimately to the West Coast Regional Council for decision. So John, for the modelling purposes, has chosen this. There are different options. Want to acknowledge those, and we will bring different options to you, or you can request different options for those the rating model to be run on.
Cool. And further along the same line, is there any consideration given around the prudent reserve, and is there any allocation there to build that up, as in rating slightly more than what we actually need? Build a reserve.
So can I answer that, please, John? A point I want to make is that any unspent maintenance rate goes into the prudent reserve, okay, automatically. And in terms of the quantum of that prudent reserve, that is again through the joint committee for recommendation to the regional council to set that prudent reserve. We have a particular formula that we set, but as has been noted by Tom earlier, that many of the schemes choose not to use that full formula to its full force to set their prudent reserve and choose a lower one. That's okay, but any unspent maintenance goes to that prudent reserve, and when you've hit its ceiling, then you can even back off your rating if you want to. Thanks.
Yep, Councillor Eadie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly about that 30-year term. As we know, banks normally, maximum is normally about 30 years. I remember Frank at the meeting last year, Frank Dirty, rest in peace, indicated that we'd be even potentially looking at a 60-year loan, but of course we can only reach out at the moment for a 30-year. So I understand where the calculations are coming from, but that's got to be built into account the fact that we can extend over time. But I appreciate that at the moment we have to work on 30 years only and then look to the future after that. Let's leave it at that. Happy to be corrected.
The way the rating system spreadsheet, which will be a tool the council's going to have to use, that'll deal with all those. It'll just shuffle the numbers around and it'll come out at the end, and I think it'll still be, it won't change what I recommend, it won't change my end result. unless there's some other more fundamental percentage changes.
Okay, any further questions of John?
Just one more, sorry to sound like a dog with a bone, but Reefton is a significant number of houses that, multiplied over, that number of houses divided into an indirect benefit could actually significantly impact on the overall. Would like to.
I don't think the impact would be significant. It would make a difference, but I don't think it'd be a significant difference. I don't think it's not going to turn your $189 into $150. It might reduce it by a little bit, I suspect, because the value of Westport is so big. I think it's driven more by that.
CEO, then Mayor Klein, and then we'll I think we'll move on.
Yeah, look, once again, if the joint committee would like us next time we discuss this to bring an option that does consider Reefton as part of the indirect benefit at that low class, we can do that. Yeah,
easy to do.
Yeah. So, but I'm sensing that you probably want to see that. Thanks.
Mayor Klein?
Just one other thing around particularly high value CV properties. Is there any differential? I'm thinking dairy farms that could potentially be outside the scheme and are literally no different than the average families, really, that'll be paying exponentially more than because their property happens to be worth 2.5 million or something.
I wondered how you deal with that one. They're running big businesses. Most of them are only paying indirect benefit. All are really. They're running big businesses and they rely on the services that are protected by this community, by this system. They come here for their maintenance of the equipment, all this sort of stuff. I think no other scheme have we ever considered separated out dairy farms from anything else, for anything different. They've always been in this, that's been on, mind you, I must confess we have none more on capital value. Yeah, if you do it on area, you can change the system quite a bit, but it's still got big areas too.
It's an interesting
it's something worth thinking about.
Interesting conundrum, because you stand the risk of doing that divide between urban and rural, and I've never seen that go down very well.
I ran the spreadsheet. I fed my rough numbers, my rating numbers back into the big list of all the properties, and there weren't that many that were huge. There were some big mining companies they're paying. Sorry.
Yep. Righto. No, thank you. I think look, there could be some appetite. I don't know, Mayor Klein, that this committee and perhaps the Buller District Council could have a workshop on this, but it's your people really, and I think your community. So I don't know if there's an appetite, but look, let's go back. This is at least it's a start. Colin, one last comment.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with you fully. We took this paper as, and I'd like to say, John, thank you very much. Fully understand. We took this as a info. It's basically a seed, and we are going to develop it. So I hear what you're saying, Mr. Chair. Let's move on and understand that this will be coming back in more detail and with more discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Eadie. That's great.
Thank you.
Right.
Yep.
Moving on, we're actually going backwards. Sometimes they say you've got to go backwards to go forwards. We're going back to item 7.3. I missed that off the agenda early on. Resilient Westport Master Planning and Evacuation Planning Update. It's a verbal report. So welcome Paul Zanin, Inu Dowler, and Claire Brown's not here. So welcome up, guys. You got 10 minutes. Still got a lot of items to get through here. So, Paul, you go first, are you? Is it?
Go first, yeah. Kia ora committee, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Paul Zanin. I am the project lead for Westport's master planning. So this has been an activity undertaken over the last 16 months, broken down into 3 stages. So stage 1 was better off funded by the Buller District Council, and that was to understand the context and the background that the project was working in above and beyond flood response work as such. So during stage one, this is where the project expanded the scope both geographically and in terms of looking at outcomes as well. So this builds on the recommendations of the 2100 report that was approved by both West Coast Regional Council and Buller District Council in 2019. It was the final recommendation, and it was to look at the long term of Westport. So what we did in stage one is we also looked at some of the other things that are happening in Westport above and beyond river flooding. So looked at the multi-hazard kind of response for the area, and also looked at the economic boom and bust cycles that have been here for a very long period of time. Stage two was funded by Resilient Westport. This was a small funding line that came out of the business case that was presented to government. I need to make a point that this is integrated work. This runs alongside the phenomenal work that Peter Blackwood is doing in terms of the flood defences, and also integrated with Buller District Council's business as usual, stormwater enhancements, etc. as well. The project is not advocating the move, relocation, or abandonment of Westport, full stop. So I just wanted to put that key message out there for the media not in the room. So the project is looking at what are the growth opportunities for the district. So at the moment, we've got the TTPP obviously coming into force this year, which is opening up new zoned areas for potential subdivisions based on 25, give or take, new houses being built in the district per year. That can stretch out over an easy 15-year period. What the project has found throughout stage two is that we are looking at how do we activate a growth strategy for the district. So taking into account those boom and bust cycles, at the moment, we've obviously got a mineral strategy and the government making a lot of noise about going for growth. In this case, we've identified a land pocket with reasonable proximity to town that can both act as a major growth enabler, but if required into the future, can also act as an insurance policy for Westport. As an example, if there's a localized earthquake, there's liquefaction, people need to have a home. This is built on the example of Christchurch, of what Rolleston and Rangiora were to the residential red zone in Christchurch. This is not advocating the managed retreat or the forcible retreat of Westport at all, but it is looking at multi-hazards and stretching out into that resource consent timeframe. So I do encourage you, all the documentation is up online. As of last week, the Buller District Council has adopted in principle the key strategies within the plan. That takes it from Resilient Westport and moves it into a BDC project from here on in. So I'll keep it brief, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, kia ora koutou, Henry Dowler, project lead for the emergency management components of Resilient Westport. For those of you that haven't heard this already from me, those components include advanced evacuation planning, flood-related evacuation planning, a review of, I guess, sort of what you would call preparedness and response systems, which is really the technology platform that supports the activities of the Emergency Operations Centre and others that are involved in an evacuation. Looking at some capital expenditure on additional resources, which is essentially containerised resources, equipment for alternative EOC and welfare cache. And then there's also some community capability and resilience work, which all of the latter three sort of really support the advanced evacuation planning. So our focus over the last 3 months that I've been involved has been on actually sort of pulling together a draft enhanced evacuation plan. It's gone through several iterations and a number of sort of conversations with different people and groups, and again, it's changed quite a bit in the last fortnight as a result of some other input we've had. So the plan is to have that plan sort of completed around about the end of June. Again, after another round of consultation with the sort of participants in the process, Peter and Co, around the protection work. The emergency services and others who participate in implementing the plan. And then we can focus on those other components that we talked about because they really support that implementation, building things like community capability, but also some surveying, for instance, around some of the estimates that we've included in the plan around evacuation in a logistical sense. So getting a sense of how many people can self-evacuate versus those who will need support, and the nature of support that they'll need. So we just want to go out and actually have a conversation with people in the community directly to say, well, in the event of, what would you be able to do in terms of self-evacuation versus not? What sort of support would you be looking for? How might you like that to be delivered? Those sorts of questions. So that's it for me. I sort of feel like I've been light relief after some of the other things you've had to run through.
That's fine. Thank you very much, guys, for your update there. Questions? Councillor Cole.
You identified where you want to evacuate. Some people can't self-evacuate.
Where to?
Where to?
Yeah. I think the key thing to remember about this evacuation planning that they're doing is it's assuming a fairly lengthy lead-in time in terms of the warning of what's coming. So the assumption is that you'll be able to move people some distance. So you could go to places like potentially Panakahi, Reefton, Murchison, those sorts of places where you can actually have people accommodated, or even further afield if that's required. So the assumption at the moment is 24 to 36 hours notice, based on modelling and forecasting and so on.
Yeah, and that's from our flood forecasting model, which is so vital for this.
It's based on floods, not yet.
No, it's totally focused on flooding, Obviously, those other hazards are a completely different story. There will be components of the plan you can apply to those, but if the roads are gone, then clearly you can't exit.
Two quick things, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thanks, Henry. Look, there are, I think there's some really important lessons to be learned from the previous large flood, and there are some people in the room that actually had to deal with this in real life, and we need to make sure that you get connected with those people to actually understand some of the successes, but also some of the challenges from that last flood event, Chris. So that's really important. The second thing is that earlier today, West Coast Regional Council has met with board members and management committee of the O'Connor Retirement Home. And there are some particular issues that need to be well worked through with that. That's really important. And I'll get you to meet with the O'Connor Home representatives through Christine. We'll organise that for you. Thanks, Henry.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Yep, Councillor Reedy, you got your hand up.
Yeah, two quick points. Thanks, Mr. Chair. One, just Paul mentioned stage one, better off funding through BDC. That just doesn't hit the press and make wrong impressions. The better off funding was provided by central government, not by BDC. And then stage three, we were looking at, Paul indicated that funding from BDC, perhaps, but that hasn't been agreed upon yet. It's part of it will be part of the consultation process. So just to make sure that there's no misunderstandings that may go out of the community as a result of stage one and stage three, as indicated by Paul. Thanks.
Thanks for that clarification, Councillor Reedy. Any further questions or comments? No, thanks very much, guys, for your presentation. Right, we'll move on to next item on the agenda, 7.5, and that's have we moved that? No, we didn't. No,
I'll be happy to move.
So moved by Councillor McIntyre, and it's just received a presentation, and no, we did. I moved that.
No, that was 7.4, 7.3.
No, okay. We'll move that. Councillor McIntyre's moving that we received that verbal report. And that's seconded by Councillor Cummings.
Yep.
All in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Right. We've got two items on the Organs Island Karatiri Scour. One's to do with the debt, one's to do with emergency work. So we'll deal with 7.5 first, and that's on page 47 to 69 of your papers. And Tom Hopkins, you're leading this one again with Chantal, are you? Or Chantal?
Yep. So I was asked by West Coast Regional Council management and council to do a deep dive into the status of Karatiri Scour and Organs Island, the immediate and emergency works that were undertaken there following the flood events. This paper, the attaching paper, was presented to Council, West Coast Regional Council, and Councillor Frank Dooley recommended that we bring this paper to the Joint Committee for consideration and guidance. So the paper essentially breaks down the costs for both Organs Island and Kawatiri Scour totaled 2.287 million. At the time that the works were undertaken, the Kawatiri business case hadn't been submitted to government, but the works needed to be done. And there was a hope that government would come to the party and cover those works. Government did come to the party, but not for the full amount. They provided $1 million under the Building Westport's Resilience Flood Protection. So that left a hole, and I've read lots of minutes to see what was supposed to happen, and there's nothing actually concrete. So the recommendation in this paper is it proposes that this committee endorse the balance of 1.28 million for both projects plus interest to be charged as a rate to the Westport Rating District.
Loan balance.
Yeah, the loan balance.
So before we put that, I'll open it for discussion. So discussion around the table. Any questions of Chantal about that or discussion? Councillor Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we know, Organs Island, there's been a lot of finger pointing. Had the island been maintained as it should have been through regional council's asset, we probably wouldn't be talking about this amount at the moment. However, we are looking at about $1.2 million. When I first purchased the house in Westport in 2018, I was paying $85 a year regional council rates. Now I'm about $450, and by the time we include this plus what John was talking about before, the differentials in that, I'm looking at close to $1,000. Okay, regional council rates up from about 85. Now on top of that, we've got I would look at about 5,000 local council rates. That's almost $6,000, about $500 a month to have the privilege of living in Westport. So I'm not going to endorse this 1.2 million. I want it to be discussed by council. I appreciate it is a regional council decision, but it has quite a material impact as far as I'm concerned on the Buller ratepayer, especially those in Westport. That's where I'd like to leave it, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Reedy, any further discussions? Anyone got an answer to that? I have, but Mayor Fine, go first.
I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but chucking $1 million, 1.2 onto the loan, can perhaps give some guidance to Councillor Reedy. What is that?
I can't.
Is it $5, $50? We don't know.
I don't know. Sorry, I don't do the rates calcs.
Right.
We did investigate whether or not we could use some of the 10.2 mil local share to cover these costs, but it wasn't included within that consultation and within the form of that 10.2.
Okay, thanks. So I mean, I think I take Councillor Reedy's point, but I think the issue is one of, regardless of who thought they owned it or no one thought they owned it, it's one of those assets that's doing a job, and it needs to be considered as part of the greater scheme. It's kind of almost immaterial whether it's regional council rating for it or BDC rating for it. It's the same people paying for it, and so I think it makes sense to me for it to be included as part of the broader Westport scheme, and then it's captured in the maintenance. I guess that's my question. It will be captured in the maintenance and the understanding of the broad scheme going forward.
So Organs Island was an orphan asset. That's what we call them. It is now on the Scour works, or the island works are now on our asset register, and they are insured.
Because my understanding of it's one of probably the fundamental cornerstones of the scheme in terms of the job it does and the largest of floods. So yeah, for that reason, I think that we just have to include it.
And that, Tom, do you want to speak and then Daryl, please?
Yep. Just very
briefly, a point of clarification that hopefully helps councillor Reedy there. The indicative rate demand calculations that John presented before did include this value.
Did include.
Oh, yes, it did.
Yeah.
He included 1.5.
It's actually slightly overestimated in John's calculations at 1.5 rather than 1.2.
So just for clarification for people that might be listening to this meeting, so that'll be capitalised over 30 years. So while it seems like a significant amount, it's actually going to be.
It'll be smooth for intergenerational equity reason and all of that to take that into consideration.
So it'll be over the 30 years.
There was a regional council.
So that'll be not 2 years.
CEO next, and then.
Yeah, look, I a couple of points, but look, the second point that I was going to make has now been clarified. Thank you, Chantal. And Tom, that the Organs Island 1.2 and Karatiri is included in the modelling from John. But the second thing I want to categorically state is that until the works was done post the flood, West Coast Regional Council had no assets here. So there was nothing for us to maintain. Okay, there were not regional council assets. And just to that point, there are many assets right around the West Coast, flood protection assets that have been built by various entities or farmers or landowners themselves that are not West Coast Regional Council assets. And it's really important that the only assets that we maintain are on our fixed asset register. Otherwise, they're called orphan assets, and it needs a conversation with the community whether they're going to be in a flood scheme or not. Thanks.
Thanks, Daryl. And I'd just like to acknowledge the previous council. I weren't on the council when this work happened, but the regional council has got in and got that work done for protection of Westport. And actually, I know there was hope that the government would fund some of that, but that never come to pass, as did the whole scheme was, hoping there would be a lot more funding. So that work got in, and that there's a debt that's actually responsible to this community. And it's like Mayor Klein said, I think it was, or Councillor Howard, it's a really important part of the scheme, and it's all part of it, so it'll be. So is there any further comments or that? Well, I'll put the recommendation, Chantal, I know you did it, but 1 was receive the report, 2 was endorse and propose a transfer of debt unable to be recovered from the Crown, that's 1.287712 plus interest for the construction of flood defences at Organs Island and Karatiri to the Westport Rating District's loan balance, and note that the West Coast Regional Council will consider the feedback received from the Joint Committee and making a final decision on whether to add the funding shortfall to the Rating District's loan balance. So this is a recommendation. So have we got a mover for that, please? I'm happy to, Councillor Cummings, happy to move it. Seconder for that. I'm happy to second it. Oh, no, Councillor McIntyre seconded that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Are those against? Show of hands.
May I speak to that, please, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm in favour of 1 and 3, obviously, because I'm receiving the report, and obviously I can't say yes or no to what regional are going to consider, but definitely number 2, I do not endorse the proposal.
Okay, and do you want your vote recorded against that, Councillor Eadie?
I want my vote recorded against number 2, please, and name recorded.
Yep, thank you. I'll do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Murray, where were you on the, I didn't note where you were on that. Were you for or against?
For, thank you.
Thank you. Noted. Yep. Okay, thanks for that. We'll move on to the item. Actually said it's 8.4, but it's well, I'm going to call it 7.5.1. It's Organs Island and Karatiri Scout immediate urgent. Are we?
That's the attachment.
Oh, that's the attachment. Righto. Yep. Righto. So it had a recommendation. So we all covered that. That's on page 76.
Oh, yes.
So 76, it says, resolved that the funding shortfall regarding the combined immediate urgent works completed.
Chair Hatter?
The full, yes.
That is the attachment to the paper that I presented.
Okay, I understand. Yep, I've got it right. Yep.
So you need to
Right.
go to 120.
Yep, I've read the whole thing, but it was a wee bit.
It's all right, it's confusing.
Okay. Certainly was. Yep. Okay, so we've done that and dusted. Right, we'll now move on then to 7.6, Rating District Finance Report. Chantal, that's back to you. That's pages 120 and 121 of the
You
meeting.
should just call this the Chantal Show.
Yeah, well, you're doing quite well.
So this is the Rating District Finance Report for the financial year ended 2024. It includes comparators from the prior year, although I do need to note that at the bottom of the page, there has been a slight amendment to the prior year where the loan balance has been put as nil. And given what we have just discussed for this year, the loan balance will go back to that 2.1 or 2.17, I think, 1.17 in the previous paper for Organs Island and Kawatere Scour being added to the loan balance. That will factor into the lower part of this financial report. But we had an opening balance of 76k, and that's essentially our prudent reserve. There's rates income and then some costs to give us a surplus of 87k added to prior rolled forward, leaving a prudent reserve or rate reserves balance of 163k.
So that's good. We're building up a good prudent reserve starting to for the amount we need. Right. I'll actually, the recommendation to receive the report before we open up for discussion. So we'll open up discussion first. Councillor Eddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to receive the report and move that it be received. And thank you, Chantal, for the work.
You're welcome. And the team, it's not all me.
Thanks, Councillor Eddy. I'll second for that. Mayor Klein, thank you. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Those against? That's carried unanimously. So was there any further discussion on that or questions of the report? No. Okay, we're moving through it now. We'll move on to 7.7, Annual Works Report, pages 123 and to 124. And Tom, this is you this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I start on this, I just want to make the connection with the terms of reference. And I think I'm speaking to not necessarily the folk in the room here, but maybe others that are listening in, and the questions that have been made about the function of the joint committee and what role it plays relative to the other entities that we've got associated with the flood protection scheme here. Okay, so this is what Chantal has just presented to you, and what I'm about to present to you now is squarely aimed at your function in the ongoing management of the scheme. Okay, to receive information from West Coast Regional staff, council staff, and provide advice to regional councillors, in particular setting rates for the following financial year. Okay. So the annual works report, what that does is it provides a little bit more detail about the work carried out in the previous financial year. It provides some detail about the work that is being carried out or proposed to be carried out during the current financial year. It outlines where we expect your financial position to be at the end of the current financial year. It then outlines what we propose is carried out in the following financial year, i.e. 25-26, and therefore what the recommendation is for a maintenance rate strike for 25-26. And then that's then taken into consideration by councillors when working through the annual planning process. Okay. Now, given that the scheme is quite new and quite early, Paul, this is quite brief relative to other rating districts up and down the coast. So you can see for last financial year, 23-24, really just some administrative costs, okay, including a contribution to the cost of engineers' time associated with managing rating districts and rating districts assets. I remember this one generated some discussion last year at that $35,000 value. And when I start to talk to you about what we're proposing to do for next financial year, you'll get a handle on how we're proposing to change that. Okay. Any questions on last financial year before I move on?
Colin, you got your hand up. Councillor Reedy.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, I'm looking for clarification here. Regional, of course, have completed their long-term plan 24-34. So I know I realise the question was put about the last financial year, but we're also talking about the current financial year and also 25-26. I'm just not sure how our discussion fits as a committee fits in with your already adopted long-term plan 24-34. Can I just have some clarification, please?
Sounds like a job for the CEO. Yep.
You on that one, please?
Okay, so it's a good question. What we do is for each of the schemes, we make a financial provision out along the 10 years, and basically we run lines out based on what we expect to be the expenditure, but within some bounds we know that could change on a year-to-year basis. So what we do is we work with you to set a rate on an annual basis, and then take that through via an annual plan, but generally they don't tip over the LTP and trigger any special consultative processes. So in short, we make some assumptions in our LTP about how much your scheme is going to, the rating lines for the scheme, each of the 23 schemes, but we always consult with you on an annual basis to secure the exact number on an annual basis through the annual plans. Hope that answers the question.
Did that answer your question, Councillor Reedy? Yep, happy. Great, thank you. Back to you, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can bring your attention to item 3, which is the current financial year 24-25. We have got in our estimated total cost for the year 2 items of actual physical work, if you like, and then there's a couple of administrative items in the advertising and Westport office consumables, and then we've also got an allowance for any unforeseen maintenance that might need addressing at Morgan's Island and Kauturi Scar. I'll just come back to the first 2 items. Item 1, regular cross-section surveys. So this is a program that we run to monitor the performance of the scheme against the bed level adjacent to the river that it's protecting the rating district from. In the past, that cost has been funded out of the general rate as far as Westport is concerned, because we haven't had a maintenance budget for it. We do these surveys every 3 years. We're now shifting that cost into the rating district's expenditure for the year. So that's that 11,700. For the second item, that is the work that John's doing on developing the rating classification. Okay, so that's our budget for that piece of work. So that gives you a total of 53,000 for the year, with a budget of what was it for the financial year, Chantal? This financial year?
I don't have this
Oh, you
financial
don't.
year.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what that, I think that's something that we need to bring into these reports in the future. Okay. So what we then do is move into item 5, and with all of that above, we give you an idea of what we think your prudent reserve will be at the end of this financial year, start of the next financial year. which at the stages in the region of 266,000. So you can see that prudent reserve starting to build. So we've been rated a certain amount, and we're not spending it all on the maintenance side of things at the moment. Any questions and comments on that?
So Tom, that's question from Councillor McIntyre, that 266 is plus or a minus? That's plus, isn't it?
Oh, that usually means approximately.
Yep, that's what you're anticipating the prudent reserve will build up to about 266. Now, just a question from me. I've asked this at other rating district meetings. So if those scheduled maintenance, if they're not spent, if the 30,000 is only 20,000 or the 10,000, that then builds the prudent reserve. So the regional council don't swallow it up. That actually goes into the rating district's prudent reserve. So that's a budget for going forward, but the money unspent will just build up your prudent reserve, and then it answers that. Mayor Klein.
Just, Aaron, I hate to nitpick, but the cross-section surveys have been a feature of the river for many years. And so just to be very clear, it's because we've now got a rating district, it's being tagged to the rating district. I guess my challenge is, what part of that is, what point is that not regional council BAU to monitor its rivers versus the rating district? And that's now being shifted back to the rating district. I understand why, fair enough, but that is a change of policy or
actually, I'll tell you what, I'll provide you with some further clarification here, Mayor Klein, and a possibility of lowering the cost of that for the current financial year. So traditionally, else in other rating districts, the way this has been run is 50% funded by general rate, 50% funded by the rating district. Okay. What we're now moving to is, for the next 10-year survey program, is a model where we're using gravel royalties to offset the cost of the survey and bed level analysis work that needs done as a result. Now, at the moment, we've got some work to do to figure out how much we can offset that cost by, but in an ideal world, it would mean that at worst, it will mean a reduced amount to the rating district. At best, it would mean it wouldn't cost the rating district at all.
I agree. I think we want to see a policy that's consistent through the whole district. Obviously, there's some the Karami, the Whakanoe, branches of the Buller River.
Yeah. So you're quite correct, and that figure, I'd need to clarify whether that's the full cost there or whether it's just 50%, as has been done in the past. But West Coast Regional Councillors have endorsed the policy to bring the gravel royalties into the equation for assisting with that level of service assessment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you. And just for clarity, I think that the sectional surveys provide huge value in terms of knowing what's going on with the river. So they're a critical part of it. It's just about who should pay for it. That's all for my question.
And Peter, you might
just make a comment on it, but we haven't had the detailed assessment yet.
Push a button.
We haven't had the detailed assessment yet, but what has been fed back to me is that there's, and Councillor Cole could probably comment on this too, is that there's very little change overall in terms of bed levels, and there has been some news that people are concerned about bed levels, but I obviously we have to monitor to alleviate that, but I don't think there's an issue there, isn't.
I don't think Councillor Cole's conflicted there, because you're actually only giving an opinion on what's happened rather than actually.
Just over the last 20, 25 years, which we've been doing them, we've found that the river, the profile of the river across has changed, but the actual sectional area has remained pretty constant. So if it's built up on one side of the river, it's steepened on the other side of the river. So it's still, the river still can handle about the same amount of water, because it's the cross-sectional area overall is
entirely Yeah, entirely. And in the last very detailed report done by Matt Gardner, there was essentially no change. That was exactly what council.
A
It's
classic
entirely
example,
true.
is if everyone looks up from the Buller River to that island that's just up by the Kawatere Scour, and thank God that island's building up, but if you have a closer look at it, it's got grass on it. Grass takes 4 or 5 years to build up, but the hasn't really, even though it has built up a little bit on the true left side, it's scoured out on the Kawatere Scour.
It will compensate when it's in that case.
In the cross-sectional area and capability of the river to move the amount of water is still almost identical.
If you look at it morphologically, that will happen, and also down at the mouth, when you get the onset of a flood, it will push it out through the mouth. And so there's a lot of talk on this, but it's all fine.
I think Councillor McIntyre could probably vouch for a bit of that with the it takes gravel out of the just above the wharfage area too. So,
yeah. Councillor Cummings, and then the CEO. Did you want to comment through things?
I was just wondering if the gravel cross sections is going to be doing the harbour and that as well. Does it include the harbour, or does it include, because you guys obviously do your own, don't you?
We do soundings, I don't know,
Soundings.
how far down you go.
So it's the cross section that we're doing for the regional council going to help the soundings and all this sort of stuff? Is it all part of that, or?
Yeah, there's about half a dozen cross sections done from the mouth of the river to up towards the top end of the wharf.
So basically, the district council won't have to pay for that anymore. Is that what we're saying?
CEO.
Okay.
Here's a sober.
So can I just say, I think it'd be really good if we take an action, Christine, to circulate to all committee members the new policy for riverbed surveys of the regional councils adopted. So could we circulate that, please? The second point that I want to make is that, look, just to be really categorical with you, I've found a way to probably make it a lot more cost effective and cheaper for each of the schemes to have their surveys done through the diversion or the proper legal application of gravel royalties to pay for those cross sections, where previously the schemes had to pay 50% on the general rate. With the proper application legally of gravel royalties into that area of activity, we're pretty confident that it's going to be even cheaper for the schemes to get their surveys done than it's ever been before, and we'll stick to that survey approach over the next 10 years. And so you will be able to see this in your future accounts as those costs come through and the benefits that accrue. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further questions of the annual works report of Tom? Or Tom, you still got to carry? Oh, we've got to carry on.
Yeah,
that was up to there. We haven't even struck a rate yet. Who's asking? Colin? Yep. Councillor Reedy.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I was until we just reminded, I was about to move that we received the report, but if there's more to come.
More to come. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
We're getting through. I see the media's yawning, so we must be getting close to the end. Right. Right, Tom.
The media's yawning.
Before I go on, we have been presenting that updated survey program to each of the other rating districts, and I decided not to put it on the agenda for this one, thinking we already had enough on the agenda. But as Daryl says, we'll follow up and make that available, that paper available to you. Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
All right. Item 6, proposed rates for maintenance rate for the 25-26 financial year. The approach that we've been taking as far as the maintenance side of things is concerned, the physical work side of things is concerned, is outlined in our long-term plan, which is at the moment a fairly coarse instrument of 1% of the capital value of your scheme. Okay, so at the moment, if your scheme is, Morgan's Island, and Kauturi Scour, with a value of around 2.2 million, then your maintenance rate strike is $22,000. Okay, or recommended rate strike is $22,000. I think we could consider bumping that up a little bit if you wanted to bring McKenna's into it as well, but McKenna's is quite new and unlikely to require anything over the next year anyway.
What about the Cats Creek vegetation clearing? Was it not much?
Again, very low value and minimal effect. Yeah. The next item is the engineer's cost recovery. Now, I do need to talk to you about this. So we are shifting from a model where we recovered the cost of our engineers on a pro rata basis based on asset value. We're now shifting to a model which we see as being fairer of actual time spent by our engineers in monitoring and maintaining and reporting on the scheme. Okay, so that figure there of 11,100, it is a bit of a wet finger in the air, and as we start to build more data up about how much time it is actually taking, that number will get firmed up. It might go up, might go down. It's more likely in your case to go up because your scheme gets bigger. But that's what we're proposing for the following financial year, which you'll see is quite a considerable reduction from the previous financial year at 35,000.
So that's referring to maintenance, Tom, isn't it? Because only maintenance, because the major scheme engineering cost is in the scheme.
Just really quickly, I can just confirm that our area engineers are now time sheeting and putting their time down, to each of the different schemes as a way of recording that. Thanks.
Just one point for clarity, and just to check my understanding, but I think it might be useful for anyone that is watching, is obviously we've talked a lot today about much bigger numbers than this in terms of capital works. And my understanding, Daryl, you might be best, I don't know, but is that effectively you're spending the government's money first. And so the drawdown of the ratepayer share is probably still 18 months away or whatever. You might want to just talk to that, because I think that provides clarity, because we've talked some really big numbers around capital works and it's not reflected in the debt servicing plans for the rates here.
Mayor Klein is absolutely correct. I was very successful in negotiating that we fully expend on the capital the 15.6 government money first before any local share kicks in of the 10.2, and that's very advantageous to the scheme. So that's correct. However, what I would say is that we are still expending money on the scheme from local share, because under the government funding rules, any of our staff time, so not consultants and contractors, but our staff time, whether they be fixed term, casual or permanent staff, we've got to pay for those costs ourselves for the scheme, and that goes to local share.
Thank you. Okay. Any further questions before Councillor Reedy moves us? We received the report. So no further discussion. Yep. So yes, Councillor Reedy. Yep.
Very quickly, it is technical, Mr. Chair, but this business of charging, for example, engineers' time, cost recovery, essentially when the general rates, when the general rate is, my understanding is general rate, everyone's charged throughout the region. And then we have the, if you like, the cost recoveries. So we ended up with a charge directly, in this instance, to the Westport rating district. And then we get a credit, obviously, in your accounts. But I'm not sure how that credit then translates into a reduction, if you like, in the general rate. But I just want to park that on the table if I can, because it is getting technical, and I'd rather one of the accountants address that sometime in the future. Thanks.
I think, clarification. You want to give Councillor Reedy
just really quickly, that's not how it works.
No,
thanks.
So Councillor Reedy, I can actually tell you that the engineer's cost doesn't come out of a general rate. It actually is charged to the rating district. So if I can explain it, anyone that's in a rating scheme, whether you be in Punakaiki, you know, that's got this little scheme there, or one of the major town ones like Westport or Greymouth, the engineers are working for that rating. If they're working on those rating schemes, they are paid by those rating schemes. It doesn't come out of general rates. So let's just look at it. Our people on Reefton, for example, they're not in a rating scheme as such, so they don't actually contribute to that engineers. The engineers are paying for the people that it's usually pays, basically. Is that correct? CEO? Yep. And then the mate, yeah, so that's how that works. Yep. Thank you. Right, so Councillor Reid, are you happy to move that we received the report? You said earlier on you were.
I'm happy to remove, Mr. Chair, yes.
Yep, thank you. Seconded by, yep. Yep, Councillor. And all in favour, say aye.
Chris Cummings.
Yep, Chris Cummings, yeah. So, yep, right, we'll move on to this general business. Any general business? Anyone online got, yep, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably inappropriate, what I'm about to say, but I'd just like to thank you very much, Peter, for the way you've conducted this this meeting, and I would very much like you to reconsider your position regarding the local body elections coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. There's a thing called AIDS that's coming into the situation.
I'm hearing you, Peter.
Thank you. Yep. Any further general business? No. Daryl?
Yeah, just as a matter of general business, just what I would encourage again is all councillors, both West Coast Regional and Buller, as well as the community reps. I know that there is talk out there in the community about vegetation control, channel management, and concerns around the scheme. We need those being fed through to the staff. Paulette Birchfield is the area engineer that's responsible for maintenance. Peter and Jordan are responsible for building the scheme, but Paulette is responsible for maintenance. They need to come through to Paulette for consideration and assessment to see if that's a warranted piece of maintenance of the scheme and the channel that we need to feed into the annual work schedule. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cole, did you have something you want to bring up in general business?
Bring up an item, and I'm not sure where I got it from, but it's about the Organs Island
financial paper,
and there was 1.5 million set aside for that, and yet last meeting, I guess it would have been, it was brought down into contingency funding, and I'm a little bit uneasy about that. We've got that money was specifically set aside for planting on Organs Island, and now it's been down onto as a contingency item, and there still hasn't been either a study done or a tree planted or even any work done on Organs Island.
Well, that's a Resilient Westport issue tomorrow, and another big meeting tomorrow, so I'm sure the CEO will actually be able to fill you in on that. Councillor Cole, it's very contentious on the Resilient Westport Committee. So, Daryl, do you want to explain that, please? What DIA?
Councillor Cole has adequately described the situation. There was 1.5 million for the land transfer, and in our reading of the contract with the government for the planting out of Organs Island as a nature-based solution to stop the overflows. Councillor Cole is correct that money was then taken up into contingency. That decision to take it up into contingency was made by DIA officials, and I've kept pointing out at the steering group that was not done through proper processes through a project change request, and if that money, 1.5 million, is used for contingency matters and fully used as a contingency, then that leaves a hole in the scheme. It's something that I'm working on at the moment. I'm concerned about it, and I'm trying to come up with some solutions there, and I'll keep you informed about where that gets to. Thanks.
Matt Gardner was quite adamant that the bush planting of Organs Island was absolutely vital to the whole scheme. Yeah, they're like it's right at the head of the scheme, and if we can still get an extra couple of hundred cumecs down the Orowati, that should really be going down the Buller. Sound like a crack record, but it's a significant amount of difference to the Orowati compared to the Buller, and I just worry that that there might never happen if we don't keep a handle on it.
So can I suggest, Councillor Cole, that if you want to move a recommendation from this committee, that be a focus of the Resilient Westport steering group. I think every little bit of help, so that given you've raised it, it might be just to note that as a resolution from the table of the steering group. And Mark, you might want to second it. I'm just floating.
No, so Councillor Cole's got a motion here that he's moving that that the steering group committee extremely concerned that money was transferred from the planting of Organs Island by DIA to the contingency fund, and would like that to be reconsidered. Is that the
second that?
And yep. So thank you, Councillor Reedy. That's seconded. So I'll put that to the committee. All in favour, say aye. Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you for that.
That's the joint committee.
The joint committee, yep. Joint committee, yep.
Joint committee to the steering.
This joint committee going to this. It's actually a long week. Right, any further general business? I'd just like to apologise that I'm getting tired. We had a long council meeting yesterday, and I spent 11 o'clock running through trying to do a run sheet last night, and so it's been a long day. But anyway, look, thanks very much for everyone for their contribution to this productive meeting. Noting this is just another step to protecting Westport from future flooding. And I look forward to the next meeting and significant physical works commencing. So thanks everyone for their attendance today. No, it's not my last meeting. No. There's going to be lots more. So I'd just like to thank everyone for that. Yep. Thanks for everyone online. Yep, for attending today, and look forward to our next meeting and everyone that presented the likes. Thank you. Meeting closed at 12 minutes past 5. Yep.